With that, I'll call this meeting to order, and we'll ask Pastor Kruger to give us an invocation, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Pastor Kruger.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Hey, listen, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for your service to our community. I know that you do a lot of work, and sometimes you don't get a lot of recognition for it, and I just want to say thank you. So, but I'll go ahead and pray right now. Father, I thank you for those who serve God and stand in the gap for us. Lord, I pray right now that, Lord, your word says that you give wisdom to the wise. And I pray that, Lord, you would give wisdom to each and every member, Lord, today as they go through this meeting, Lord, and deal with things that affect each and every one of us. I pray that you would lead them, you would direct them, you would give them clear and precise directions so that they would feel very confident in the decisions that they make. Lift them up to you and pray that, God, not only would you bless them in this meeting, but God, you would bless them in their daily lives as they walk through life. And Lord, I would pray that you would keep them, bless their families, and minister them on a daily basis, Lord. I lift them up to you right now and pray for them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Appreciate the words of wisdom. And now we'll have Commissioner Rice lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you'll stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Sadly, we have had one more death from COVID in the county. And with that, I'll read the instructions that we have, given that we're following the COVID process. Members of the public may click on the following link to watch the live streaming of the Board of County Commissioners meeting, https://youtube/NGLXRSJROQC. And there's a plain statement of that in the agenda. And I would suggest that people go to that. To offer public comment before the board meeting, members of the public may have submitted public comments online through the county's public comment forum by clicking on the following link. And that's also listed in the agenda. Written public comments may be mailed to the Douglas County Manager's Office at Post Office Box 218, Minden, Nevada 89423. But all public comments must be received prior to the date of the meeting if the comment is to be included in the supplemental materials. All written public comments that are received prior to 4 p.m. the day before the board meeting will be compiled and be added as supplemental material for the county commissioners and the public to review prior to the meeting. Any written public comments submitted the day of the board meeting will be compiled and added as supplemental materials to the county's website and distributed to the Board of Commissioners within 24 hours after the meeting. Members of the public may call the county manager's office at 775-782-9821 to obtain help in making public comments. To make public comment during the board meeting, the public must call 775-781-6007 and leave a voice message, which will be played for the Board of Commissioners and public when the public comment is announced. Although the public comment phone line can accommodate multiple incoming calls at once, if a member of the public should get a busy signal, please call back because the possibility for a high volume of telephone calls, there may be an increased potential for technical difficulties. Citizens are therefore encouraged to submit their public comments in writing prior to the date and time of the board. When leaving a voice message, members of the public should begin their public comment by stating and spelling their full name and whether he or she favors, opposes, or has no opinion on the agenda item under consideration. No more than one message public comment per person will be played to the county commissioners and public during each public comment period. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person and will only occur at the beginning and end of the board meeting. Public comment will not be taken on each agenda item during the meeting. If members of the public desire to comment on more than one agenda item and believe that their comments will exceed the 3 minutes offered at both the beginning and end of the board meeting, they are encouraged to submit written comments to supplement their verbal public comments. Douglas County's public comment phone line will become available to take public comment at 1 p.m. for opening public comment. When the chair calls for the opening public comment, the line will remain open for at least 5 minutes to allow members of the public to call or until the last caller has finished leaving a voice message on the county's public comment phone line. Once the chair closes opening public comment, any voice messages received after that time will be considered closing public comment. The county's public comment phone line will remain open to allow for closing public comment to be recorded at the meeting as the meeting progresses. When the chair calls for closing public comment, the phone line will be open for at least 5 minutes to allow members of the public to call or until the last caller has finished leaving a voice message on the county's public comment phone line. All right, you can tell that was written by a lawyer. And Ms. Wood, has the public comment phone line been open at 1 o'clock?
Yes, sir. Natalie Wood for the record. I have received 4 voicemails so far, and I can start playing them.
Okay.
Lynn Muzzy, MUCVY. Looks like one or more commissioners persuaded their moneyed friends to prop up a general election candidate from a vanity political party in a desperate attempt to keep a pro-growth BOCC majority. How many more times will the establishment spend thousands of dollars to buy landslide election losses, but for at least one bitter loser leaving the commission that was score settling with OPM? Can't have an honest politician who stands up for the voters whose lives are being turned upside down by overbuilt residential development. This board majority has approved several residential projects that cover Douglas County's permeable open land, most outrageously the Park 2500 project. These mega communities are dumping tens of thousands of new cars on our roads and threaten our water supply. This drought year be damned, thanks to water expert Penzel's whistling past the nitrate plume. Their traffic mitigation plans, a federal build grant that held out the false hope for funding a 4-lane bypass around city center. The taxpayers' booby prize is a 2-lane Muller that will do nothing for our already overcrowded streets. So we never forget his service to the community. Let's name 395 through town Penzel Parkway. A partial list of this board's majority's legacy includes allowing senior managers involved entire day to gracefully resign with full benefits, shuffling the dangerously overcrowded J-like building problem to the next board, stubbornly flacking for the tax grab known as Redevelopment Agency Number 2, which the voters rejected, and a mishmash remake of the master plan. Outgoing commissioners Penzel and Wall shall become little more than political fixers for their developer friends, governing against the best interest of Douglas County residents.
Okay, next.
Ellie Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R. Please take note the public, internal departments, agencies will have approximately 10 to 12 days with a Thanksgiving holiday involved before the BOCC reviews the Master Plan 2020 revision. Being handicapped with COVID further supports continuation and approval date being more fluid. How is staff handling requests from the public, internal departments for additions, deletions, etc., versus just the Planning Commission only recommendations? How many days are planned for the Board of County Commissioners review, as it is safe to say it took the Planning Commission up to 5 days between workshop and current review cycles? Nevada planning law does not mandate how often master plans should be prepared or updated. However, NRS 278.190 does require the Planning Commission prepare an annual report to the governing body with any recommendations concerning the master plan. Again, stated in this document, which is the Nevada Planning Guide 2017 under NRS 268 and NRS 278, city and county planning commissioners are empowered to perform, recommend, and advise the governing bodies and other public authorities on several important functions. Prepare and adopt a comprehensive long-term general plan for the physical development of the city, county, etc. The master plan must be adopted by the governing body. The planning commission is then required to make annual recommendations to its respective governing body for implementation of the plan. I still have not received an answer from anyone about the requirement of the Planning Commission to complete an annual master plan report. Furthermore, I have asked for copies of any annual report since 2011 and have not received any documentation. The commissioners cannot just negate their responsibilities. Does not completing the required annual reports have any impact on the master plan approval?
Okay, I do want to make a note that the public comment phone line is 775-783-6007. We have a comment saying it was not read incorrectly, Barry, so I just want to make that note that it's 783-6007. And then I'll keep playing the next voicemails.
Okay.
Tim Slade. Regarding agenda item 4 in East Valley, the Planning Commission voted 5-2 to deny the master plan amendment for this parcel. Then they voted on the zoning map amendment, which should have been a 7-0 vote for denial since it could not possibly meet the required finding to be consistent with the existing land use. It failed 5-2, with only reliably growth members Walder and Kendall voting in favor. Given the Planning Commission's strong votes for denial of both the master plan and zoning map amendments, the board should vote for denial today as well. The proposed master plan amendment for this 40-acre parcel on East Valley Road does not meet the required findings and therefore must be denied. Regarding consistency with the master plan, the intent of the forest and range land use designation is to maintain the resource and open space. To change this land use to rural residential would do neither. The East Valley Community Plan has its first two key issues: to maintain rural character and open space preservation. The proposed action would do just the opposite. To demonstrated need, there are over 7,000 homes that can currently be built in Douglas County in approved development when Park Ranch's 2,500 are included. To say that there's a demonstrated need for more at this point is absurd. Applicants claim that in East Valley, with a size between 9 and 9.99 acres, there are only 7 undeveloped parcels. Their focus is so narrow as to be irrelevant. You need to take a broader view. To many, the entire valley is the area that should be considered. Compatibility with actual and master plan use of adjacent properties. Staff states that different future land use lies to the west of the site. It is outside the East Valley Community Plan. Without mentioning that the use is agricultural and that the adjacent property to the west was in the East Valley Community Plan until it was changed to Central Ag earlier this year. They also state that the land to the north is receiving area, without stating that it is outside of the East Valley Community Plan and the Johnson Lane Plan. Staff is either ignorant to these facts or being deceitful. There's also no guarantee whatsoever that the portion of the receiving area adjacent to the subject parcel will ever be developed. It's vacant now. Staff and the applicant don't actually address the actual use of the adjacent property at all, which is agricultural to the west and vacant to the north. Staff often likes to expand that discussion to include nearby property. This time they didn't. Of the properties within 3,000 feet of the subject parcel, 20 out of the 23 are 40 acres or larger, with only 3 having any greater density, all with about 10-acre lots. Hence, this application does not meet 3 of the 4 required findings for a master plan amendment and must be denied, and therefore this ordinance should be denied as well today. Why waste any more time?
Next.
Commissioners, thank you for your service. This is Sean Meehan, SHAWNMEEHAN. I wish to comment on the agenda item titled County Manager 7, the Nevada OSHA fine on the airport. This must not be paid. I'm asking the commissioners to honor your oath to our U.S. Constitution's Article 6, wherein you pledge to protect the U.S. and Nevada constitutions. You have a duty to honor that oath and decide for yourself. President Andrew Jackson wrote in 1932 in his veto message against rechartering the Bank of the United States, quote, each public officer who takes an oath to support the Constitution swears that he will support it as he understands it and not as understood by others. Douglas County was contacted by the Secret Service that President Trump was going to visit. 18 U.S.C. of federal law requires that Douglas County consults with the Secret Service and assists in the protection of the president. The state cannot fine Douglas County for following federal law. A judge for the U.S. District Court in the Western District of Pennsylvania ruled that Governor Tom Wolf's restrictions on gatherings during the COVID pandemic were unconstitutional, specifically the congregate gathering limits imposed by the defendant's mitigation orders violated the right of assembly enshrined in the First Amendment's right to freely assemble. Judge William Stickman IV said, quote, there is no question that this country has faced and will face emergencies of every sort, but the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede the commitment to individual liberty that stands as the foundation of the American experiment. The Constitution cannot accept the concept of a new normal where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. Rather, the Constitution sets certain lines that may not be crossed, even in an emergency. While this judge's opinions are not authoritative in Nevada, they are one of the first clear opinions offered and are illustrative of the applicable constitutional clauses and their true meaning. The Constitution is not to be suspended during times of crisis. Governor Sisolak does not have the authority to issue fines for legal acts, and Nevada Revised Statute 414, the governor's authority in invoking his proclamation, in no place authorizes fines. I believe that it is the duty of these commissioners to either ignore these fines since they are illegal, or to reply with a concise letter pointing out the concepts presented here with legal references, then seek similarly situated businesses and governmental agencies in Nevada to file a federal lawsuit for violation of civil rights. In no way should these fines be paid. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time to comment on this issue afforded me and for your service to your fellow Douglas County residents. God bless.
Do you have another?
Okay, that's it. That's the last message received, and it came in at 1:05 p.m.
And it's 1:17 and you have no further ones?
Correct. No further messages have been received.
All right. Then we will get on to the business of today's agenda. We got the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move to approve today's agenda.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Walsh. For approval of the agenda, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The motion is carried. The agenda is approved. Approval of previous minutes. We have one set of minutes for the commission meeting on the 1st of October. Is there a motion to approve, or are there any changes that anyone wishes to have?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the draft minutes of the October 1, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners.
I'll second.
Is there a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any nays? No nays, the motion carries. Now for the consent calendar. Anyone wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, then we'll need a motion for approval of the consent calendar items A through L.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the consent calendar items A through L.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays, the motion carries. So we'll move on to our first administrative agenda item, which is Public Works for possible action, the discussion of the Nevada Department of Transportation NDOT proposal FY 2020 to 29 annual work program updated for Douglas County. Mr. Erb and NDOT representative, Mr. Bonner and Mr. Cole. Please, who wants to start?
Oh, well, good afternoon. I'll take it from here. For the record, my name is Cole Mortensen. I'm a Deputy Director for the Department of Transportation. To start things off, Commissioners, I'd like to thank you for your service to the county and the state. I know right now these aren't easy times, and we're seeing a little bit of that too. We're going to continue to face some challenges in the future, especially with some of the declining revenues that we've seen with traffic volumes going down due to the COVID pandemic, and how we'll be reprioritizing our program into the future. But as part of our county consultation process, we come to you annually to discuss what your priorities are and which projects we have going on in your county. So to start off with, this is a partial list of the county's concerns and priorities. The first slide here is all of the vehicle-related issues, and the next slide is bike and ped-related issues. Previously, your top two county priorities were identified as installing a bike lane on SR 206 Foothill Road from US 88 to Genoa Lane, and an intersection evaluation at Genoa Lane for acceleration lane southbound, and US 395 at Illuminaire. And then further down the list, we have a realignment of Genoa Way possibly to Airport Road. Items 4 and 5 are tied together with the county's construction of Mueller Parkway. Item 6 is a request for passing lanes south of Gardnerville to the state line. Item 7 is a truck climbing lane north at Micah Drive. Item 8 is the construction of a roundabout at 88 and Mottsville. This would make it consistent with the Centerville and 88, just miles down the road, that was constructed 2 years ago. And item number 9 is State Route 28 or 88 capacity planning. And item number 10 is installing a roundabout at SR 756 and Waterloo. Moving on to the bike and ped priorities and concerns. Starting off with construct a shared use path on Old Kingsbury Grade, the old Pony Express route. Widen B638 to install a separate bike lane and pedestrian structure for the bike facility. The Tahoe shared use path from Sand Harbor to Spooner Summit. Bike lanes on Tillman Lane, connecting Vista Grande to Jacks Valley Road and add a bike lane. The addition of bike lanes on Buckeye Road. A US 50 shared use path, bike lane from Calais Drive to Lake Parkway. And to provide bicycle signal or grade crossing between US 395 and State Route 88 and Micah Drive, and addition of a bicycle lane on 395. So the One Nevada plan was completed in 2018, and this plan established a performance-based approach to guide the department in defining priorities based on the One Nevada plan goals. The department completed a priority-driven 2021 to 2024 state transportation improvement plan and work program. The department continues to work on refinements to this process that will include an assessment of long-range transportation needs. This process will guide the department in the allocation of resources towards the needs and or the projects that meet the One Nevada goals and ultimately improve performance on our transportation network. The needs collected through planning studies, department policies, and the consultation process will be screened through the One Nevada plan goals to identify those that best improve performance of the transportation network. This process will also help determine how and when validated needs advance. The stars on this slide are where we would like your engagement. We're using data-driven, transparent process to show you how we are doing prioritization, and we'll provide you we'll provide ways for you to submit your transportation needs. We will communicate how your needs compare to other needs statewide. And so as you can see on this slide, our goals are on the left: to enhance safety, to preserve infrastructure, optimize mobility, transform economies, foster sustainability, and connect communities. And those are the goals that we'll be evaluating the projects against to determine which ones move forward in the STIP and the annual work program. So what we've done in Douglas County over the last year, we've done several chip seals. We also did a double microsurface through town. I know that that was a concern early on, and so I was glad to see that move forward. And then we're currently working on the ADA and crosswalk improvements through the center of town, and I believe that that a future resurfacing will follow that. So some of our highlights for the 2021 work program are listed on this slide. We have a couple of the transit programs there at the top of the list, along with some safety hydraulic improvements on US 50. We have, and I believe that that's at Warrior Way. We've got the Martin Slough shared use path moving forward, Lake Tahoe Stormwater Project cooperative program there, and then a number of rehabilitation projects, as well as a dike repair and guardrail repair, along with other projects that we have, just various maintenance jobs, totaling $9.5 million for the year. So today, what our suggestion motions are is that we'd like to hear from the county commission to determine whether or not the top two priorities that you guys have listed on slide 2 are still the top two priorities for the county, and that we'd like to ask for a motion to accept our fiscal year 2021 annual work program.
Okay. First of all, do you have any comments you want to add, Mr. Bonner?
No, we'll respond if you have any questions.
Okay. Well, we'll keep in toes. I take it John Erb is not going to attend the meeting. Is that right?
I'm present. I'm here.
Okay. I didn't see you. Do you have any comments, Mr. Erb?
No, I don't.
Well, I'm glad I singled you out there. That was good. All right. Then commissioners, we'll go down the line here. Okay, Mr. Ingalls, go ahead.
This has been discussed before, and I know where it was left at, but I think yesterday there was a pretty bad accident at the intersection of 395 and Lucerne here in town. It's a bad intersection because the speed limit increases from 25 to 35 in that area. I don't know whether it gets up to 45 or not. And the speed limit is set by NDOT. And we've talked about putting a stoplight in there. It's a terrible intersection to have to turn left in, let alone turning right. Do you have any comment on that, Cole? Has anybody mentioned that, or Lee?
Yeah, Commissioner Ingalls, we came to you back in December of 2019. We had done a study on that intersection. The utilities were run by the town of Minden to that intersection, but it did meet warrants for a traffic signal at that time. We're going to wait and see when the new development, takes place at 395 and 88, and then we'll revisit that issue and study it again.
Okay.
So if you recall, that was one of your top two priorities, and you swapped that out for Genoa Lane.
Correct. I remember that.
Okay, I thought we swapped it out for repaving 395. But I don't know. Anyway, any other questions, comments? Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. Mortensen, for your presentation. Hello, Lee. Got a couple of comments. Recently in the last couple of years, we've seen an unprecedented increase in the traffic on Highway 395, and that's a safety issue for me, anyhow. And this is caused by a number of factors. We have increased truck traffic coming from Story County and in Washoe County, we have increased traffic from out-of-state travelers, and of course we have slow growth here in Douglas County, so that actually impacts Highway 395. So perhaps we should consider replacing the proposed improvements on Highway 395 at the intersection of Genoa Lane as a priority number one, rather than the Foothill Lane bike lane project. I understand that that's the estimated cost of that project. Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's $20 million plus. And of course, as Mr. Mortensen mentioned, you guys are facing issues with budget constraints and revenue. So I'd like to see that priority number one changed to perhaps the safety improvements at the intersection of Genoa Lane and Highway 395. I think that acceleration lane, the Lumineer, would certainly help a lot. And we also, I think, I forget where it's at, the realignment number 3, realignment of Genoa Lane and Airport Road. That's a worthwhile endeavor. I think it should happen at some time in the future. But again, that goes to do that, we have to go through private land. And I'm sure NDOT doesn't have either the manpower or the money to do that right now. So, so I'm saying, why not make the improvements at Genoa Lane, the acceleration lane, and the Lumineer? Why not make that as our priority number one? And you mentioned Muller Parkway. I think it might be worthwhile, at least at this particular time, for NDOT to consider the improvements at Highway 395 north of Minden and the new Muller Parkway alignment. And that might help, if we put it as a higher priority, it might help with our build grant application. Those are my comments, sir.
Well, thank you. I think those are supportable comments. Any other comments? Mr. Nelson, Mr. Rice?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I really think that we ought to take another strong look at passing lanes on 395 from Leviathan Mine to State Mine. We've had a lot of collisions in that area, and the speeds that are traveled in that area, especially those that get frustrated being behind a slow camper or trailer or something like that, people take risks that they wouldn't normally take. But I think that's one of the things that could be moved up.
Well, that's a good suggestion also. Mr. Nelson? No? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everybody has said. I have no problem with any of those suggestions. I think they're all good suggestions.
If I could add something there, we're actually currently doing a statewide passing and truck climbing lane study to help identify and prioritize areas statewide for passing lanes. So if you wanted to, I would say that one might not be one that you want to move up in a priority, because we're already making that effort on our end to identify those areas. And once that study's done, then you can look at the results of that and we can determine what your priorities would be then.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I do think that needs to really be done, though. How do we get visibility on that, or keep visibility on it? Mr.
I think that just through the county consultation process that we have here, you guys can continue to ask those questions, and we're responding to passing lanes and truck climbing lane concerns statewide, which is why we understand, we've got passing lane issues on 95, on 395, on 93, US 50, basically any route that we have that isn't a 4-lane facility, we've got concerns on. So we're looking at that as far as advancing safety projects that could address those.
Okay. I do have a general question before I have some specific things about this. And the first is, I know that NDOT has been looking at for some years coming up with a road tax based on mileage. I think if nothing else, COVID has proven that when mileage drops off, it does so drastically. And the viability of a mileage tax seems to be less viable based on some of these things that have happened. Where do you stand right now on implementing the mileage tax?
Boy, that is a great question. And thank you for teeing that up for me. One of the things that we've been working on, and it's doom and gloom all over again. I think recently we looked at our tax structure, also recognizing that I think on the I-15 in Las Vegas, we saw a 70% reduction in traffic volumes. I mean, that's a direct correlation to 70% fewer gallons of gas being purchased, right? So currently, we've actually been taxed with, pardon the pun, looking at our revenue system and how we could possibly implement an alternative tax method. I think that everybody recognizes that it's been so many years since the gas tax was raised that it's not meeting our needs now. I think right now we anticipate being short on an annual basis to the tune of about $500 million if we were actually maintaining and operating our facilities the way that everyone would expect us to. So what I would say is that we are working with several of the state legislators and many of the organizations that also have interest in that in developing an alternate look at how we generate highway revenue. We're not entirely sure yet what that might be, whether it falls in, and part of this is also addressing alternative fuel vehicles, EVs and that kind of thing that currently there isn't a tax structure for. So in order to continue to generate revenue for those vehicles that are using our facilities, we're looking at options presently. And I believe that, Lee, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that we're shooting towards having something to the 2023 legislature.
So I'm trying to decode what you said. So do you stand in favor of or against a mileage tax?
That's a great question. We really don't know yet. We're looking at a couple of alternatives. We're looking at models in both Utah as well as Oregon that allow similar things to what have been kind of proposed in the past, whether you would have the DMV record your odometer reading and pay taxes based on that. There are also models where you have a chip that plugs right into your car and you just pay based on the amount of mileage that you do travel on the roads. And then there's any number in between. But I think what I'm saying is that we're in support of changing our current tax structure so that we can address our future needs.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I understand California is considering an exit tax. Maybe we should consider an entrance tax to Nevada from California.
Well, that is the best idea I've heard in a really long time. Well done, Mr. Nelson.
Excellent.
But I think that as our county ably demonstrates, even though the gas tax was increased 3 years ago and brought us $13 million, the diesel tax wasn't included in that tax increase. So we put it on the ballot for the folks to consider, and it went down in smoke. This at least it's going down in smoke. I guess the election hasn't been certified, but I think attacking the automobile, which has been the basic freedom of the United States, that's something that everybody in the United States wants and looks at and buys, and attacking it with another cost is just the wrong way to go. I think you're going to have to use general fund monies to do that. And I know the philosophy, especially in the state, is the user taxes, which I think are end runs around the whole thing in the first place. So I would I would think you could come up with a better model than what and this all started with Oregon. And you've had the University of Nevada, Reno studying the process. And I've never seen a report after the contract was issued. I don't know what the University of Nevada, Reno said, but it'd be interesting to see what they said about the the mileage tax. That started 8-9 years ago. But you're tacking something that couldn't be more American than the automobile. And I think it's bound to come to some failure. I hope so. So I would urge you to come up with another model for considering taxes outside of the box of a user tax, something that's out there. And that's my 2 cents. Now in specifics, certainly I support the realignment of Genoa Lane. My wife had an accident there, so I'm a real, when she could drive, I'm real supportive of that. I'm supportive of the passing lane. I think that's a great idea. The stoplight at Lucerne, I don't know about that. It's that we have accidents there every once in a while. I don't think it's as high a priority as those two things that we just mentioned. I think there have been more injuries on 395 and without the passing lane. But it's something that's come up in a recent situation we've had with building a gravel pit, which is necessary out in the Pine Nuts. And I go back to one of my favorites, which is a north-south road parallel to 395 out in the Pine Nuts. We have, as a possible solution that the BLM is implementing for that, because they wanted to put all of the traffic on Johnson Lane, which is as silly as you can possibly think. And obviously the people in Johnson Lane are really concerned about it. One of the solutions that we talked about was that they would scrape a north-south road, but it would be a real problem because it would have to interconnect with some road in Carson City. And in order to do that, there has to be a bridge. Now, there's already a bridge at Mexican Dam? Is that what that bridge is called? John, do you know? Sorry if I caught you off guard on that. But anyway, my point being that I would think that NDOT would be money ahead by planning. And I have seen a plan, and it had the NDOT name on it, but I didn't secure it, so people put it in the yeah, right category. But there was a plan to put an exit on 580 that would be right at the curve at 580 as it straightens to go towards Lake Tahoe. And it would be right at where the prison is. But at some point in time, you're going to need a north-south road because 395 gets blocked by accidents, as Mr. Ingalls was talking about. And there's, so far as I know, nothing on the books for a bridge or an exit off of 580. It would be, I think, something that should be at least a plan, if nothing else. I've been preaching this for 8 years and I've gotten nowhere, but it becomes more and more important as people look to the Pine Nuts to do things. It would really help the traffic on 395 and could be, dare I say the word, bypass for that traffic. It would cut down on traffic through the town, both towns, and it would also improve the safety, I would think, as long as we don't have too many exits off of it. But for some reason, NDOT doesn't look at doing things incrementally. But we would have to have something like a bridge first, and then we would go on further to plan the rest of the road. But it seems that we're keeping our heads in the sand about this, and I'm trying to get it elevated to some kind of consideration. Is there a possibility of even thinking about it in the high rarefied air of NDOT?
You know, I know that that's been something that was studied previously, and I would have to get back to you on what had actually happened there because I'm not familiar with the outcome of that study.
Okay. Well, thank you for the consideration. I'll leave that to Commissioner Ingalls and Commissioner Rice to wrestle with. And are there any other questions from the board? Okay, then we'd be looking for a motion subject to the suggestions that we have made already. Are there any comments on that? Commissioner Walsh?
No further comments. I'm ready to make a motion.
Then please do.
Hold on a sec. All right, here we go. I would move that the improvements at Genoa Lane and Highway 395, which include the acceleration lane and the luminaire, I would move that we move that to priority number 1, and then move up the intersection of Muller Parkway, the new Muller Parkway, and Highway 395 to a higher priority, perhaps priority number 2, and to accept the Nevada Department of Transportation's fiscal year 2029 annual work program for Douglas County as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Nelson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. Then the motion carries. We want to thank Mr. Bonner and Mr. Mortensen for taking time out of their schedules to talk to us about it, and we really appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank you, Commissioner.
for your efforts.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item number 2. For possible action, discussion to revise the labor agreement between the county and Douglas County Sheriff's Protective Association, DC SPA, as well as the agreement between the county and Douglas County Sheriff's Protection Association Sergeants Bargaining Unit, DC SPA-SPU, increasing county contributions to medical plans, insurance premiums to account for and cover the 9.47 premium increase beginning January 2021, and authorize the chairman to execute all documents necessary to implement the increased contributions, including the attached 4th memorandums of understanding, MOUs. Ms. Lang?
Thank you very much, Chairman Penzel, members of the commission. Wendy Lang from Human Resources for the record. I'm here to answer any questions you have regarding this item. And just a bit of an overview for you. The county's contribution to employee health insurance premiums is a set dollar amount currently. And that means that any increase to the overall premium would be entirely borne by the employees. For instance, last year, health insurance increased by 9%. And so the entire premiums increase of 9% was borne by the employees' individual premiums. This year, we are seeing another increase of about 9.5%. And there has been the trigger of reopening these 2 labor agreements. And so I'm before you today to request that you increase the county's contributions for this year's increase of 9.5% for, in this particular item, the members of the Sheriff's Protective Association and the Sergeant's Bargaining Unit. And the associations have signed the attached MOUs and agreed to the terms that are being presented today.
Okay, questions from the board? No questions from board members? All right. Any comments? Seeing none. Great presentation then.
Thank you.
Ms. Lang. All right. In that case, I'll call for a vote. Is there a motion on the table?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve an increase in the county contributions to the medical plan insurance premiums, the Douglas County Sheriff's Protective Association, and the Douglas County Sheriff's Protective Association Sergeant's Bargaining Unit to account for and cover the 9.47% premium increase beginning January 2021, and authorize the chair to execute all documents necessary to implement the increased contributions, including the attached 4th MOUs, the following labor agreements. 2017-22 Douglas County Sheriff's Protective Association, and 2017-22 Douglas County Sheriff's Protective Association Sergeant's Bargaining Unit.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. The motion carries 5-0. All right. Then we'll move on to item number 3, discussion to revise the county contributions to medical plans, insurance premiums for medical plan insurance premiums for benefits eligible Douglas County Employees Association members and county employees not covered by collective bargaining unit to account for and over the 9.47 premium increase beginning January 2021 and authorize the chair to execute all documents necessary to implement the increased contributions, including the attached 4th Memorandum of Understanding MOU 2017-24 Douglas County Employees Association. Ms. Lang.
Thank you again, Chairman and members of the Commission. Wendy Lang for the record from Human Resources. We are facing the same situation with the remainder of the employee population, including the bargained group, as well as the unrepresented members of the county employees. And that includes the towns and the district courts as well. The health insurance plans and premiums are currently the same across the organization to all of those employees, and there is the same set contribution by the county into those premium costs. We're seeing the same increase of 9.5%. And so for consistency and equity across the organization, this item is before you to consider providing the same level of contribution to the remainder of the employees.
All right. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Ingalls, did you have a question or comment? Okay. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Gates, why is it that I get the honor of signing these, and generally speaking, you sign approval? Is this a hot potato and you don't want to?
No, sir.
Okay, well, I'm proud to sign it, but I was wondering. But anyway, thank you very much, and we'll call for the motion. Is there a motion? Anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve an increase in the county contributions to the medical plan insurance premiums for all benefits eligible Douglas County Employees Association members and the county employees not covered by the collective bargaining unit to account for and cover the 9.47% premium increase beginning January 2021, and authorize the chair to execute all documents necessary to implement the increased contributions, including the attached 4th MOU to the 2017-24 Douglas County Employees Association.
Second? The chair will second it. So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by the chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lang. Appreciate all your efforts on this. For presentation only, community development. It's item number 4, introduction ordinance 2020-1575. An ordinance for a zoning map amendment reference DP 20-0125 to change the zoning from FR 19 forest and range 19 acre minimum parcel size to RA 5 rural agricultural 5 acre minimum lot size for one parcel within the East Valley Community Plan APN 1320-14-001-002. The subject parcel is 40 acres in size and is located at 2174 East Valley Road on the west side of East Valley Road between Eldon Way and Kathleen Way. The property owner is BJ Land and Cattle Company, represented by Keith Rubin, R.O. Anderson Engineering. This is a first reading. Mr. Booth for the community development, 5-minute presentation. So, Mr. Booth. Mr. Sam Booth. Mr. Booth. Mr. Cates, you want to make the presentation? Well, Mr. Ritchie, you're going to make the presentation. Okay, I can't find anybody to make the presentation. So that, in effect, though,
I move to deny them.
Okay. Oh, here's Mr. Booth. You're muted, Mr. Booth. Mr. Booth, you're muted. There you go.
Good afternoon. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. You are correct. The title that you just read into the record was all that was required for today's item. This is just an introduction only. And this item would be brought back for a presentation by staff and the applicant on December 3rd.
All right. Questions from the board? Already had a comment from the board. Any other board members want to make a comment? Okay. I want to make one comment, and that is that I want to thank Mrs. Amy for getting the minutes. I want to thank Mr. Booth for making sure it was there, and I want to thank Mr. Cates for making sure that people did what I expected, and I think what the rest of the board wanted, which is to get the minutes of the Planning Commission. So thank you very much. I appreciate what you did there. And the next item. Oh, that elicited a comment. Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, Sam, I'd like to know when you come back with this, how many vacant 5-acre lots there are in the county. We don't see very many of them being built, and I know there's quite a few out there.
Yeah, and then just as an aside, what you concentrated on in the minutes was TRE, and what we need is East Valley. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Any other comments? All right. Then we have accomplished our mission, which is to present this item. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to item 5, which, oddly enough, is presentation only also. Only it's a longer title. And this is presentation only, item number 5, introduction ordinance 2020-1576, relative to a zoning map amendment and planned development overlay that changes 51.67 acres of a 64.23 acre parcel from multifamily residential rural agricultural 5-acre minimum and public facility zoning to single family residential 8,000 zoning with a planned development overlay, and to also approve a tentative subdivision map for 190 single family residential parcels, generally ranging from 8,000 to 12,000 square feet in an area and including 3 public facility parcels. Subject site is located in the Gardnerville Community Plan at 1424 Toller Lane on the north side of Toller Lane between Harvest Avenue and Decker Road. First reading, Mr. Booth for Community Development, 5-minute presentation.
And once again, Sam Booth for the record, Mr. Chairman, and I can be much shorter than 5 minutes. This is just an introduction of this item as well. And pursuant to NRS, by reading the title, you've fulfilled the introduction today. This was similar to the last application. This was heard at the October 13th Planning Commission hearing. And if introduced today, this item would be brought back for presentation by staff and the applicant on your December 3rd board meeting.
Okay. Questions from board members? Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, Sam, once again on this. This does back to Stonegate, which are mostly 5-acre parcels, I believe, on the east side of this. And I'd like to see somewhat of a buffer before we have the smaller lots and that, or the road, the Muller Parkway coming through there for those lots. It just seems like good planning would plan on this having some buffer there. Just a comment. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Dave. I think we need some kind of buffer there, but this applicant is required to build at least one lane of Muller Parkway, is my understanding. Is that correct, Sam?
That's correct, Commissioner Walsh. And we'll get into the details next month, but with this project, the applicant will be building Muller Parkway across the what would be the east side of this project.
Thank you.
That's not just the one lane, that'd be the 2 lanes.
2 lanes. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. This was a presentation only and first reading. So we've accomplished the mission. We'll move on to item number 6. This is for possible action. Discussion to adopt ordinance 2020-1577, an ordinance enacting a revision and codification of the general ordinances of Douglas County, Chapter 18.06, Gardnerville, and moving the parking provision found in Chapter 18.06 to Chapter 10.12. Second reading. Ms. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Jennifer Davidson, Assistant County Manager for the record. This item appears before you today as a second reading. Just as a reminder, a history on this ordinance. Back in January of 2020, the Gardnerville Town Advisory Board recommended to this board some changes to Douglas County Code Chapter 18. This board took action to adopt those changes back in June. Since that time, we have identified issues with that action, and this is a housekeeping measure to correct some of those problems. We determined after consultation with legal counsel that some of the language contained in the proposed ordinance was in conflict with NRS 269 and existing sections of Douglas County Code. This is our way to correct that. We did meet with the town of Gardnerville to discuss these changes prior to us bringing them to your attention today. In the board packet, beginning on page, give me just one second. On page 384, you will note there is a red line version of the ordinance. The red line reflects a number of small changes that were made since the time this ordinance was introduced. Those changes are a result of subsequent conversations we had with the town of Gardnerville in which they identified some additional language that needed to be addressed that was overlooked initially when we introduced it. At this time, I would defer any of my remaining time to Mr. Taylor, who is also participating in the discussion today, to see if he has anything to add or to answer any questions.
Mr. Taylor.
Hi, Commissioners. Yes, Sam Taylor on behalf of Douglas County DAs. Jen pretty much covered everything except for one small minor change on the top of page 388. The numbers 6 through 10 should be 1 through 5. There was, I guess, Microsoft Word decided to reformat it for me whenever I cut and paste. I didn't catch it. So I just note that that needs to be changed, and we'll do that administratively.
Why couldn't we do this whole change administratively?
Sam Taylor again, for the record, because essentially it was codified the first time. So this is in the process of being codified. It hasn't been codified though yet. If it had been, we would be required to come back.
Moving from one area to another area in the code, basically.
Yes, sir. But the board had previously decided it would be in somewhere else other than Title 10.
Whoa. Okay.
It's just an administrative thing, sir.
So administratively change it. All we need is more laws, and that's all we do is make more laws. So anyway, I'm not going to stop that process. Any comments from board members? Seeing none. We'll call for a vote. We ought to have a motion first, I guess. Mr. Walsh?
Yes, sir. I move approval or to adopt ordinance 2020-1577 as presented.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, second by Commissioner Nelson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays? The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor and Ms. Davison. And we'll move on to item number 7. For possible action, discussion on citations issued by the Nevada Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, regarding the rally held by President Donald J. Trump at the Minden Tahoe Airport on September 12, 2020, for alleged violations of the governor's state directives regarding COVID-19 by Douglas County and ABS Aviation, and proposed penalties in the amount of $2,950 and $2,602 respectively, including discussion on possible alternatives available to informally or formally respond to the citations. Mr. Cates, 10 minutes? Really? You think you're going to get it done in 10 minutes? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Patrick Cates, County Manager. Before I get to the citations themselves, let me just kind of go back a little bit and review with the board kind of some of the things that have been going on that led up to this for the last 6 months or so. Going back to March of 2020, that's when the coronavirus pandemic really hit the United States. President Trump declared an emergency for the nation. Governor Sisolak declared one for the state, and the Board of County Commissioners declared one for Douglas County. In doing so, the Board of County Commissioners gave me some emergency powers, give me some authority to deal with that situation. Since that time, the governor has issued multiple directives, numerous directives, regarding people's activities, masks, business closures, limitations on gatherings, that sort of thing. This board back in April sent a letter to the governor, actually hand delivered that letter to the Capitol building, and asked that the governor allow the counties to be less restrictive than his regulations. Rural counties seem to be in a different situation than the urban areas. We have throughout this crisis had relatively low numbers of infections, although we recently in the last couple of weeks seen some increase in infection rates. We still have very low numbers. Our intent was to say that we could manage our own affairs and that we didn't need to be as restrictive as the urban areas. When the board delivered that letter to the Capitol building, we were met by Capitol Police, who took the letter. We did inform the governor's office that we were coming, but they did not receive our letter directly from us. They just had Capitol Police take it. We never did receive any response from that. However, the governor did form the LEAP group, the local group that was composed of some local commissioners, state officials, representative from NACO, to advise the governor on his regulations. That set up a framework where counties were not permitted to be any less restrictive than state directives, but they could be more restrictive. As this has gone on, there have been repeated revisions to the governor's directives. I think sometimes that they lack clarity. Sometimes the way that they, how do I want to say it? The way that they delineate what should have restrictions and what shouldn't, what's an essential business, what's a non-essential business, what the number of gatherings should be, seem to be a little arbitrary and not always clear. I know each time a directive has come out, it's taken a legal team to kind of cipher through that and figure out how to interpret those things. So it's been pretty difficult. I certainly have some sympathies for the state and the governor's office trying to manage this crisis, but it's been very difficult for us as well to follow all of these directives and try to stay compliant. I think the county's worked very hard to try to do so throughout. We instituted our own COVID mitigation plan in county facilities, and we've been very diligent in following that. Fast forward to September 9th. Chris Johnson with the airport, I believe he's on this call, as is Bobby Thompson, was contacted by the Secret Service, and he contacted me as well. The Secret Service was interested in having President Trump come to the Minden Tahoe Airport for their rally. The Reno Tahoe Airport canceled that event on them, rather kind of at the last minute. So they approached us. They wanted to have the rally on the following Saturday on the 12th. So I met with the Secret Service, met with campaign officials, talked to them about the state directives and COVID precautions. They went through the protocols that they would follow. The biggest issue was limitations on public gatherings. I think after discussions with other officials in the county and with them about the measures that they were going to be putting in place, they seemed reasonable. There's no getting around the issue of limitations on 50 persons. I think in my mind, the real issue was the validity of that order in terms of people's constitutional rights. And the fact that this was a political rally, it wasn't some entertainment event or something like that. And therefore, I made the decision to approve that. There was no board of county commissioners meeting. I did talk to a couple of county commissioners during that time, but did not bring this to the board for action. This is a decision that I made. We worked the next couple of days with the Secret Service, all the departments, not all the departments, but multiple departments, the airport, the sheriff's office, East Fork Fire, to plan as safe an event as possible. When we initially met with the campaign officials, we were told that they anticipated about 10,000 people. As we know after the fact, it turned out about 28,000 people attended that event, according to them. We also looked at the area in which the event would be held in terms of the tarmac and how big of an area it was and how many people would be in that area. And it still seemed to be far below what would be considered 50% occupancy. So anyway, those are the decisions that kind of went through that led up to that. I take responsibility for authorizing the event and stand by that decision making. In your packet, you have a letter that I put in the newsletter that kind of explained that. That was put in the newsletter last month. So we were contacted the following week by OSHA. They said that they had an anonymous complaint that county employees were exposed to COVID-19 as a result of that rally. That resulted in basically a month-long investigation by OSHA. They made repeated visits to our facilities, numerous interviews with staff. I know they interviewed folks at the airport, including Ms. Johnson. It was pretty clear that they were very focused on the rally. They asked us questions. Some of the questions they asked us, we were kind of puzzled as how it was relevant to OSHA regulations. For instance, they wanted to know if there were admittance being charged to the event, which I found kind of peculiar. But at any rate, we went through this process with them. They were very professional, but it took a long time, and it was clear that they were kind of showing up everywhere they could to try to see how compliant we were with OSHA regulations. At the end of the day, we had an exit conference with them. and before they issued the letters that are in your packet. They have found us in violation of state directives. They found both us and ABS Aviation, our contractor to run the airport, in violation of Governor's Directive 21. In particular, they cited Section 10, which is limitations on public gatherings of more than 50 people, as well as Section 22, which deals with live entertainment over a certain number of attendees. That section requires pre-approval by business and industry of any plan. That was the basis, at least for our letter. They had similar justification for ABS Aviation's letter. There are two separate fines, basically for the same thing. What they focused on was potential exposure by Sheriff's Office employees who were working the event for public safety, as well as ABS Aviation employees. Although we're not directly their employer, we control the airport, and therefore our fine includes both of those entities. The fine for the county was $2,950. That for ABS Aviation is $2,602. So at this point, well, I should also add that when that became public, there was a GoFundMe account set up. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the page right now. The GoFundMe account for the MAGA peaceful protest in Minden, Nevada. That was organized by Blaine Osborne. They have raised a total of $6,819 with an offer to pay any fines imposed by OSHA as a result of that event. Having said that, how we move forward, we have an opportunity to contest the fines. We could either pay them and be done with it and move on, or we could contest them. So in order to contest them, we have to submit to them in writing that we are contesting these fines or any of their findings, really. The deadline to do that is within 30 days of the date of the letters. So we have until the 22nd of this month in order to do that. We can also request an informal conference. Ultimately, if we contest this, it will go to the Occupational Health Review Board. Occupational Safety and Health Review Board for a final determination. I believe if that is not found in our favor, then we would have the option to go to court. Personally, I've been a little torn on the course of action to take here. It's a relatively modest fine, and we have the generosity of our citizens who've committed their own funds to offer to pay for that, which is extremely generous. And part of me would just like to put it behind us and accept that offer and move on. However, I do think there are some problems with the logic behind the fines. I think after discussing this internally with the team, what we're recommending is that we go ahead and do the notice of contest, ask for an informal conference with them, and try to gain more insight into their logic and their understanding and see how defensible our case is to fight this thing. I'm obviously looking for direction from the board on how we should proceed with this. On the one hand, if we accept the offer from the citizens to pay this fine, we won't have to invest any more administrative time on this. Certainly give the opportunity for the commission to make some statements about the just or unjustness of these fines. Or we could go through a process that may take, I don't know how long it will take, but it will take at least a month, I imagine a few months, to go through the process with OSHA. And with that, I think that's everything I wanted to say. I don't know if Chris Johnson wants to add anything, or I don't know. Bobby Thompson got on the call.
Mr. Johnson, do you want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Johnson for the record. County Manager Patrick covered everything. I can't add anything to it. I feel like we took the appropriate measures using protective gear, masks, and social distancing here in the office to not put our employees at risk. So I really stand behind Patrick on this.
Okay. Questions from the board? Mr. Nelson.
Not a question, but a statement. I think that I would like to see us make some kind of a stand on this just on principle. I think that this is totally uncalled for, what's going on by the state in this issue. I think it was a very peaceful protest. I don't know if they find any of the other protesters who did damage to property. And I just think that it's more of a political move than anything else. And I think on principle, we should do some fighting back, whatever that happens to be.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Ingalls.
This is a capricious, arbitrary, petty vendetta, and it's pretty obvious what's going on. The consideration is that we could contest this, and then the governor can create problems for the county. Under those circumstances, I think that we should go ahead and make a payment agreement, but find out from OSHA, how did they arrive at this number? And if we do pay it, then they go away for all perpetuity. Because I haven't heard about any of the sheriffs getting sick. Our numbers have been good throughout this whole process. Everybody in our county has worked hard with the state to comply and to blow off some steam. Plus, there's a lot of people from California that came over. So here again, it's petty nonsense, but we know how the game is played. And to just go ahead and say, okay, Governor, but we complied this time, and we've been complying with you. Go away and leave us alone. Thank you.
Commissioner Walsh.
Thank you. Patrick, this is the fine was levied under Section 21 of the directives, which says limiting outdoor activities to 50% of capacity. Do we have any idea what the capacity is over at the airport? It would seem like there'd be 500,000 capacity over there, and certainly 28,000 is less than half of that.
I don't have the exact information in front of me, but we reviewed this with East Fork, and I believe they came up with, based on the estimated number of attendees, that it would have been 40% capacity.
Okay, and another comment. Back in August, we had the Black Lives Matter protest down here in Douglas County, which the governor's office was well aware of, and they didn't call at that time. The governor's office didn't even call for any kind of COVID protections or anything, and certainly it was never an investigation of that. So that kind of irritates me as well.
Commissioner Rice?
I think we have some real constitutional issues here. I spoke with Mr. Cates about this earlier. One time I got a bill from the Veterans Administration for $35 for something that, even though I was a veteran, I had not taken advantage of any of their programs. And we decided to pay it because it just wasn't worth the fight over $35, pay it and let them go away. However, in this case, it was obvious that the governor was trying to find a way to spank us. The governor did not like the fact that we allowed a sitting president of the United States to come to our county. At first, he was talking about taking away our COVID funds, and then after a conversation with the Attorney General of the United States, he decided that that wasn't the way he wanted to do it, or at least that's the appearances. And so I think he was just looking for a way to spank Douglas County. And I think that we should contest this and not roll over. And that's my opinion.
All right. I pretty much spelled out my opinion in my letter to the editor, which was actually in response to a question from a CNN reporter who I didn't trust. So I decided to publish a letter to the Record Courier and state my opinion after he asked what the opinion was. And so I totally agree that while this is a small amount, I think it was the maximum amount they could possibly levy given the egregious act of not having a safety plan, which I think was false in the first place, because I'm sure the airport has a safety plan because they've had 35,000 people there for the air shows. Did you have to get, Chris, did you have to get any approvals from the Department of Business and Industry when you had the air show? Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Chris Johnson for the record. Commissioner, during the air show, it wasn't in the time of COVID. So I don't believe the requirement was there for us to get an approval at that time.
This is even more egregious then. They just created this requirement that we had to have a plan approved, and calling it entertainment. While I agree it is entertaining, it is in fact a political rally and not entertainment. You know, they have parsed their words so that they could come up with something. They were out to do that, as Mr. Ingles pointed out. And we're not ever going to get on top. The governor's not going to go away. But I think that because they did something that was absolutely egregious and petty to come out and fine us, I think we should pursue it. I agree with Mr. Cates and his discussion of alternatives. And I think that, I would personally just like to say goodbye to it, pay the fine and move on. But I don't think that really serves any kind of purpose. I think we need to say, okay, what you did, Governor, when you refused to meet with us and didn't even give us the courtesy of a response to a letter that we drew up, and then tell us that we're in charge when you know, in fact, that you're in charge and you're not delegating anything to us. You have relegated the what do they call that little group that NACO's in charge of or working on?
LEAP.
The rural county.
LEAP.
Yeah, LEAP. I mean, that was just paying lip service. There was no intention to follow anything that LEAP said. My hat's off to Dagny. I think she's really done a great job at NACO, but she hasn't had anything to work with either. This has all been a sham. And so if we just pay it and move on, in my mind, we're kind of condoning that action. And I don't think we should. I think we should, he's drawn a line in the sand and said, we're going to fine you. And I don't care what the reason is. And so they come up with some off the wall entertainment fine. And they couldn't even tell the county manager other than they were going to fine us. And they said they had to put it in a computer to figure out how much it would be. Give me a break. You don't publish your fines? Now, everybody else has to do it. Why are they given some grant of immunity? Are their lawyers bigger than our lawyers? I don't think so. I think we got the biggest lawyer. Okay, so I'm willing to say, let's go to the mat, because this is something that is wrong. It's absolutely wrong, and we should stand up and say it's wrong. And we've got 2 letters in our supplemental material that said they don't want the taxpayers to pay. I agree with that. In fact, I would have paid the fine. I would have said that 5 of us ought to share it, but I don't think that the taxpayer should be fined for this in any manner, shape, or form. And to come up with an off-the-wall thing like it's entertainment is that's wrong. And we should say it's wrong. And so I'm all for let's go to the mat. Mr. Ritchie, is this the maximum amount that they can fine us? Or if we go to the mat with them, can they increase the fine?
Thank you, Chairman. Doug Ritchie with the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. I do not believe this is the maximum fine that they could have imposed. I don't believe, though, that they can impose a higher fine after this unless there was some information that came out that would substantially change their finding. I will note that, as with most administrative agencies, there's an opportunity for an informal conference where we can ask some pointed questions about their findings, the basis for the fine, how it was determined, and in simple terms, how the county or any other county in the state of Nevada could avoid a future fine in these types of circumstances. I think what the county manager is asking is for authority to pursue an informal conference, see if we can get the fine reduced, at least obtain a better understanding of the basis for the fine, and then if necessary, formally challenge it. I mean, I don't know how far the board wants to go. I think clearly the citizens, or a group of citizens, support what happened. It's unusual to have a GoFundMe for a government, but there are many options that the board has.
Well, I'm not out to be the savior for the rest of the counties. I'm out to say this is what he did was wrong, and it was all politically motivated. He tried, as Mr. Rice said, he tried to take away the COVID money, and then he found out that probably wasn't legal. So then he comes back and says, we'll just fine you. He says, OSHA, go find something, and don't come back until you do. Come on. If you don't think that conversation took place, yeah, right. You believe it too. That was purely and simply a petty move on his part, and not even acknowledging when we came up and we made a good faith effort to negotiate with him, and even provided a tool. He didn't even receive the letter, never acknowledged he received the letter, and moreover, as a common courtesy, didn't write back to us about it. And so, I would say that he even violated the NRS, because we are a Dillon's Rule County. The legislature didn't tell us it was 50 people. He made that decision. Does the legislature get involved? Did the legislature pass a law telling us that it has to be 50 or less? No, he just did that administratively. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of lawyer talk about in the AG's office about how they could maneuver this around the legislature, but even that is probably illegal, because they're not supposed to be able to go around the legislature. They got to go through the legislature. Mr. Cates is the executive of the county, can't do anything that we haven't given him the authority to do. He had the authority because of COVID to negotiate this, and he did a great job, and he should not be on the hook for that. We should be on the hook for it. But we aren't, because we're the legislative arm. And I think it's just, this is, on top of COVID and all the other controversies, for him to inject into this petty politics, I think is absolutely wrong. And so I don't see the negotiating with OSHA as anything but a stepping point. I think we need to go to court on it. I think there are constitutional issues, and I think we ought to just jump that. What do you expect the conversation with OSHA is going to be? It'll go something like this. Well, you shouldn't have done it. And we were told that you got to pay the fine. So why don't you just pay the fine? Here's how the computer figured it out. So, now we can increase it. So if you get too nasty with us, we're going to increase that fine. Now, so why even have that phase of it? Let's go to the highest part of it. I don't know what it's called. What is the highest part that we can go to, Mr. Cates?
I'm sorry, the Occupational Safety Health Review Board?
Yeah. Who's on that board? Are they all government employees?
No. No, they're not. They're all appointed by the governor.
Well,
it says a lot right there.
Yeah. So where's our step in the court process, Mr. Ritchie?
Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. Again, part of the administrative process allows for an informal meeting where a lot of these questions that you have raised can be answered. Again, just to clarify, the governor, he didn't issue this citation, OSHA did. Admittedly, he's the chief executive. He handles that, but it's a large organization. My recommendation would be that you use every administrative remedy that you have available to you, including the informal meeting. At the very least, you can gather additional information. If we don't get an acceptable response, then you can continue to the Occupational Safety and Health Review Board. And then again, if you feel that their decision was arbitrary and capricious is the term, if you feel that there was no basis for them upholding the fine, then you can continue on to district court.
Well, I think Commissioner Ingalls and Commissioner Rice are going to end up having to deal with this if we continue down the line. So what are your opinions, gentlemen?
Well, I agree with you. And, we wanted to comply and keep it to 50 people, but all of these people showed up. What could we do? We couldn't turn them away. And just this crowd that consumed everything there. And the governor didn't help us. So, we had several thousand people show up. Not our fault. Don't pay it.
Point of fact, Trump owns the airport through the FAA.
No, you got that too.
He was. Mr. Rice, how do you feel?
You think I've made my feelings clear. I don't think that we should roll over. We have on more than one occasion attempted to engage our governor, and on more than one occasion he's been more than happy to snub his nose. So in this particular case, I think that not roll over. I think that we should take this to an administrative hearing, and then after that, I'm sure that they will not back down because they want to save face. So
yeah, right.
End up in court, and I'm more than happy to be part of the process.
I say we just go to court, Mr. Walsh.
I think we have to go through the proper steps first. I think that we should first go to the hearing, and then when they make their arbitrary and capricious decision, then we appeal the decision and go from there. Mr. Ritchie, do you agree with that?
Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. Again, under the administrative process, you can have an informal hearing. You can go straight to, you can submit a request for an Occupational Safe and Healthy Review Board appeal hearing. And then depending on what happens there, you always have judicial redress. There are multiple steps.
you got the time, you can do it. But Commissioner Walsh?
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Wes and whatever else has been said here. This is a constitutional issue, and I can just see us going to the appeal board and saying, and they'll probably say to us, okay, we'll reduce the fine to $1. I don't care if it's a penny. We don't pay the fine. We go to court, and we stand up for our constitutional rights.
I agree.
That's a good point, because this is not a question of the dollar amount. It's a question of the principle that we're dealing with.
Right.
And Barry, what you said before was this is petty politics at its best, and it's shameful.
Yeah. Okay. Now, any further comments? Have we run our ire over on this? If not, what kind of motion are you looking for, Mr. Cates? Are you looking to take direction, which I think we've given you plenty of? Are you looking for a motion?
Well, you've certainly given me direction. Excuse me. You've certainly given me direction. I don't know if Mr. Ritchie has any ideas about how to frame a motion for this. Excuse me.
Chairman, if I may, Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. It'd be nice if there was a motion. There's a couple of things. There's a couple of issues involved. One is if they lower the fine, would that be acceptable? Does the county manager have authority to accept, to settle this if they reduce it? Or as Commissioner Walsh said, it doesn't matter. If they reduce it, you're going to continue on. We need to know exactly what the majority of the board wants, the direction the board wants to take.
Okay. Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I would say if they're willing to pay us $1, we should drop it.
Well, no, they need to pay us $2. One for the airport and one for us.
Okay.
Mr. Rice. So, Mr. Walsh, are you ginning up a motion?
I was writing down some notes. I would move that we direct the county manager to go through the initial administrative step with OSHA, and if they are not willing to drop the fine, then we go on further and appeal this to the highest level we can.
Second.
Is that motion clear enough for you, Mr. Ritchie?
It's actually the county manager. Clear enough to me.
I know that. But you're the one that will. I'm certain this will be played over and over again for administrative hearings and probably even into court. So I want to make sure that we are getting good advice from our counsel. Is that correct?
Well, again, if the direction is the administrative process, there's an informal meeting that's available to the county. We are not required to take that. The next step is to file basically an appeal. And we would go through that process in good faith. Depending on how that came out, we would come before this board again for further direction before we initiated litigation to challenge an administrative hearing decision.
Okay, and Mr. Walsh also included if they don't take the fine back, that we would continue the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the motion.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Cates, do you have anything you need additionally?
I don't think so. Could I ask for the motion to be repeated?
Mr. Walsh?
Sorry.
I would move to direct the county manager to go through the initial administrative steps with OSHA to have them consider repealing the fine. And if they do not repeal the fine, then we the county manager is not authorized to pay the fine, but to go to the next step, which probably is district court or whatever the appeals board may be.
Okay, now we had a motion on the floor, and I think you should withdraw the initial motion and the second.
I withdraw the initial motion.
And the second was Mr. Nelson? Huh?
No,
I think I did. I withdraw the second.
Okay.
On the initial motion.
Okay, so we have a second motion now. And do we have a second for it?
I second.
All right, so we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh and a second by Mr. Ingles. Does anybody want the motion read back? Ms. Slepper, do you have are you keeping the minutes?
Nikki Leeper for the record. Yes, I have the motion.
Okay, and does anybody need the motion read back? Okay, so we're clear as to what we're going to do. Thank you, Ms. Leeper. And Mr. Cates, you agree with this? That's correct. And you're supporting it, Mr. Ritchie? I'm going to get you to say yes or no. So,
Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. I support whatever action the board wants to take.
Is this so far for you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is this so far defensible in court for you?
Of course. I mean, at this point, we don't even know the basis. I mean, that's what the informal process is, to find out more information about why they issued the fine and how they determined that the fine was appropriate. There's a lot still be discovered.
I don't see it, but okay. So we have a motion by Commissioner Welch, a second by Commissioner Ingles. Any further discussion? None? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The motion carries. So we are now moving on. One question that I do have on this before I close the whole thing out, and that is implied in all this was the acceptance of the GoFundMe to pay any fine for both the airport and the county. Do we need a motion to do that, or are we just going to work through the process and find out what the fine is actually going to be?
Chairman, if I may, Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. If it's the board's will that you accept the gift, if it's made, you could do that at this time. It's part of this item to discuss the citation. However, currently the board's will is to proceed with the appeal process and not to pay a fine. Yeah. So if the county manager were to bring back another item to say this is the revised appeal amount, the revised fine amount, then the board could consider that, and at that time you might consider accepting the gift if it's been made and if it's still open.
Okay, so you will continue negotiations with the GoFundMe folks, and right now we're not talking about paying any fine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so then we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, I could use 10 minutes.
We'll go ahead and we'll continue. No, I'm just kidding you. Okay, we'll take It's 2:48 and we'll come back at 3 o'clock. How's that? All right, gentlemen. Thank you. And we've all returned. I'm sure Mr. Nelson's going to join us shortly, so we're all back. Good to see you again, Mr. Ritchie, Mr. Cates. And we're joined by the CFO. Thank you. So we move on for a presentation and an update. This is item 8. The record reflect that all the commissioners that were present are present again. And we're doing item 8, presentation and update on CARES Act funding and expenditures for Douglas County. Mr. Cates, Ms. Willoughby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Patrick Cates. We just wanted to give you an update today on where we're at with the expenditures of our distribution of CARES Act funding. We submitted a report back on, sorry, I'm trying to find the date here. Back in July, the governor's finance office distributed submittal packets to counties to claim our share of CARES Act funding, along with terms and conditions. Which, by the way, one of those terms and conditions was that we comply with governor's directives, which after the state learned they couldn't do that, they sent revised terms and conditions that eliminated that provision. But that's a side note. We submitted those documents back in the end of July. We received half of those funds, according to their terms at that time, and we brought to the board a spending plan and resolutions to bring those funds in. The board gave me authority to administer those funds. On September 1st, we requested the second distribution of funds per the terms of the state. You have in your packet both the initial request from the state as well as the second request in September. The main thing that I want to show you is just a couple of reports. So let me get to my share screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. This is also in your packet. So this is the most recent report that has been sent to the state. Terry Willoughby has been the primary point of contact with the governor's finance office and put this report together. I really want to commend Terry for her work on this CARES Act funding. This really, it's really great to have this money, but it's also a really big program to administer. And we're really not set up to administer big grant programs. We don't have those kind of resources. Terry has been the tip of the spear on a lot of this stuff. The whole team has, but she in particular has put in a lot of hours trying to manage this money, trying to make sure it's spent equitably, and that everything is being done just right so that we're fully accountable for the expenditures. But I'll just kind of walk you through this real quickly. We've got some public safety payroll expenditures that we've claimed. I would note that the feds continue to come out with updates on how these funds can be used. So sometimes we're kind of going back and relooking at these numbers based on changes in federal guidance. But we do have payroll expenditures, the small business grant program. You'll see only 15,000 reported here. We had allocated $1 million. I have another report where I'll go into some detail on that. It looks a lot better than it may look on this report. Some regular payroll expenses. We had a pass through to East Fork Fire District. We gave them a sub-grant for some of their COVID-related costs. We also had some items to improve telework capability. We had an IT item on our budget. A lot of what's approved here is replacement of computers, to replace them with laptops primarily in order to allow mobility for people to work mobily. The next item is the tourism recovery grant that was given to the visitors authorities, and you've heard a presentation on that, as well as the job training program for Join. Election support. The food program, this is community services, some of their costs associated with that. We've had some pass-through payments to East Fork Swim Center for some of their PPE and modifications they had to make to their facilities. We also paid for NeoGov distance learning. NeoGov is our talent management application. That's what we do for recruitment, and we have an education program. Since we had so many people initially teleworking, this seemed like a really good opportunity to expand educational opportunities remotely. Public health expenses, Carson Valley Food Closet was awarded for a van purchase for food delivery. We entered into an agreement with Moss Adams to do compliance monitoring on all of these sub-grants that we're giving out, so that there is an audit function going on there. Paid sick leave and paid family medical leave, we had a little bit of that. That's covered under the provisions of the CARES Act. That's leave related to that. Community services, they purchase air purifiers. Those are installed and operable at the community center. Honestly, don't remember what improving social distancing is. I think that was some of the modifications we made, like for plexiglass and that sort of thing. Terry can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my recollection. Some COVID-19 expenses related to the county jail. And then NACO had some the administration costs for the Small Business Grant Administration. Just to remind you, we had a company that NACO hired, and multiple counties joined in on that to administer this program through their application. And so that's some of the costs related to that that are passed through to NACO. Personal protective equipment purchases, as well as for community services, the homemaker tablets, and some modifications to their meeting rooms to accommodate social distancing. This kind of broke out into a lot of detail, maybe more than what you saw in the budgets for what we submitted to the state. But this is the kind of breakdown that the state requested for reporting of actuals. As you can see, we certainly haven't spent everything yet, but we do have it allocated out. And we are pretty comfortable that we'll be able to account for all these dollars by the end of the calendar year. There's multiple opportunities to cover some of our own costs if we fall short on some of these, such as the Small Business Grant Program that I'll talk about in just a second. One thing I also wanted to mention, I am hearing that Congress is working right now on an extension of the timeline to expend these funds, as well as another CARES Act package that could bring us even more funds. But we're still working under the assumption that this all has to be spent by the end of the calendar year, which is the end of next month. We'll see if Congress changes that. This is where we stand currently. And if I could just jump over and share the report on the small business grants. Right there. This was sent out as supplementals. This should be in your supplemental packet. So, small business grants, the process that they go through, they have to apply online through NACO's website. They're set up specific to each county. Each county has similar but a little bit different criteria that everyone has to go through. The company that NACO is contracted with goes through an initial analysis of all the information that these companies upload. They have to upload financial statements, talk about their hardship, how many people they have, that sort of thing. And then it comes to us. And Lisa Granahan has been the primary person working on this. I want to commend her as well. She also has invested quite a bit of time in processing these. And then we also have a small business counselor through the university that assists these businesses with their applications. So currently, the list you see here are all the ones that have been approved through the internal review committee. That means they've gone through all the internal approvals and we're ready to issue them a grant award. A lot of these have already been issued. Some of them are still in process. So far, we've awarded $215,000 to 31 grantees. Now, the grant period has closed. It closed on the 28th, I believe it was. So we got a total of 71 applicants. We still have another 40 that are under review. If all those process through without any problems, we should be spending this amount, $566,902, which is a little less than the target. Obviously, we set aside $1 million for this. What we're looking at now is an alternative. Well, let me step back for a minute. We thought about opening up a second grant period and trying to encourage more businesses to apply. However, I think the consensus for all the counties that are participating in this is there's a lot of time and effort being expended for these businesses and for us to administer this. It's pretty costly to work on both ends for, $5,000, $10,000 grant. And all the counties were kind of unanimous that they didn't want to keep doing this. So we don't really want to open another grant period. But what we're looking at right now is a possibility of taking that other 400,000 or so that we haven't distributed and using it to buy PPE and other related equipment, to have the county buy that, and then we would distribute it to businesses based on request. Carson City is doing this right now. That seems to be working pretty well for them. So I know East Fork Fire, as our emergency manager, is looking at that right now and looking at options for how we could purchase that equipment. It's a lot cleaner that way. We've got the document trail. These businesses don't have to upload all their financial information. They don't have to come up with receipts. Should be a lot more straightforward. And a lot of them are claiming PPE related type expenses. Some of them are using it for operating and payroll and rent and things like that. But I think there's definitely a need there, and that may be another way that we can help these businesses. That is all I have at this time. I don't know if Terry Willoughby wants to add anything to my comments.
No, thank you for Terry Willoughby for the record. I just wanted to clarify on the social distancing aspect. That also included all the signage throughout the county where reminders to be socially distanced and markers showing people to be 6 feet apart. So that was a big chunk of that expense.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ingalls. You're muted, John.
The Barton Hospital on 395, they didn't need any additional funds for what they were dealing with in this. Did anybody approach them?
We've been in conversation with Carson Valley Medical Center, and they have some requests in, but they haven't come through the approval process yet. I don't recall seeing anything from Barton. I know at the emergency management meetings that we have all the healthcare providers participating, or most of the healthcare providers participating. And I've been mentioning this program and encouraging them to apply. But I do think we'll have some money for Carson Valley Medical Center pretty soon.
What was I going to ask? I forgot what I was going to ask. Somebody else asked a question. I'll get back to it.
Okay.
I would just add that one of the things that we found that's really challenging is that there is so much CARES Act funding out there and available. A lot of these, especially like nonprofits, medical providers, there's multiple sources of funding. In fact, after we rolled out our small business program, the state then turned around and rolled out theirs, which was pretty similar to ours. In fact, they were using the same platform and crashed our platform for a couple of days when they stood it up. So, like nonprofits have been trying to to get some interest there, but they actually have a lot of sources of funding from the state and otherwise from CARES Act. We're kind of awash in this federal monopoly money.
Remember what my question was. Are we aware of any businesses that are closed down permanently because of the COVID restrictions?
Lakeside.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah, Lakeside's an excellent example.
Other questions? You know, Patrick, I hate to see you take that 400,000 from the small business. I ask professionals, even when I go through their office, are you aware of COVID funding for this? A good example is the dentist. And dentists has now got this HEPA filter thing all over the place. You know, they got all kinds of gowns. He said, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And the dentist is a big contributor and big part of the Chamber of Commerce, and he didn't know anything about it. He contacted Lisa, and he got in just under the guideline. But I'm thinking about places like Iggy and Squiggy's down there in TRE, you know, right at the 208. Did they get any money? Did they even know it was available? You know, if we're going to give money away, they can't eat masks, but they can certainly, you know, buy money for operations and pay their employees. And I think partly they're afraid to do that because then they think that the federal government's got a hand in whatever they're doing. But I think the other part of it is they just don't flat know. You know, I think there are businesses out there that really could use the money. And it kind of pains me that when the government says, you know, it's really, it's a hassle to administer the program and we put a lot of money in it. That's not a reason to not do it. I mean, the whole point of it is to get the businesses going, not as an issue for it. Well, it's hard work for all of us, and we shouldn't. You know, I don't consider that a good excuse, frankly. Or did I make my point? You know, I think we ought to have some kind of contact with each and every business in Douglas County before we turn any money back for PPE. It reminds me of, you don't remember this because you're too young, but when I was in high school or when I was in junior high and elementary school, every stairwell had food that was set aside for civil defense. And that was in case we got bombed, you know. And that civil defense food was rotated out, and they kept that program going forever. I don't think anybody ever ate any of it, and for good reason. But they just had the money, and they just kept buying food. Now, if we have the money right now to support small businesses and/or medium size, I understand they raised it to employees with 100 people. We ought to make sure every employer has been contacted, you know, and there's got to be a way to track that. And I understand it's hard, but it's even harder on these businesses to stay in business. I wonder, do the Spanish-speaking ones, are they aware of this program? Has somebody contacted them? Because they provide a lot of services around here, you know, and I think we ought to make sure that we're accounting them all. If I start running into people that say, "Oh yeah, I've already applied," then I'll be more confident in it. But right now, just in my anecdotal conversations with folks, I don't get the feeling they even knew about it, much less applied. You know? So I think before you turn the money back, we ought to make sure we have a program that's contacting everybody. And I don't think Lisa can do it all by herself. You know, and part of this funding is if we can hire Moss Adams for $45,000, which I think is exorbitant, but nonetheless, it's what it is. We ought to be able to hire somebody part-time to go and talk to every business or some buddies or, you know, some organization. Maybe the Chamber of Commerce in both Lake and the Valley would, if they were given money to make the contacts, would contact everybody, every single person, because we need to look after everybody, not just those that applied. I'm off my soapbox, but I hope they got through.
That's a good point. I mean, the guy who's my dentist, he was closed for 2 months.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of times we don't even think about the professionals.
Yeah.
If I may, we worked with both chambers to get out the word multiple times. We did multiple press releases and social media pushes, and Lisa did personally go out and reach a lot of businesses. And when I talked about the administrative burden of these, it's not just on us. It's administrative burden on the businesses. There's businesses that don't really, you know, they may have other sources of CARES funding, or they just don't want to hassle with that. I mean, we require a lot of them. You have to require a lot of information and receipts.
Well, then let's hire somebody to fill out the forms for them. But we
have a business counselor that's been helping most of them through that process. And we got
Who is that? Who is the business counselor?
What's that?
Who is the business counselor?
Business counselor.
I honestly, I don't recall. It's through the university.
Oh, I know who it is. I've been there, and I can tell you from personal experience, when you're a small business and you're trying to get money, that's the last place to go, because that is rich with application funds and rich with paperwork to fill out. This program should have been fairly simple, and especially when we hired somebody to put it all in position. You know, a lot of people that wouldn't qualify normally are getting paid through the small business amounts, and the actual small business isn't getting the money. I'm really concerned about that. And I think we need to make a bigger effort. And I'll leave it in your court as to how to do that. But I really,
Mr. Chairman, I think Ms. Willoughby's been trying to get your attention for a while.
I know that. I'm watching.
Okay.
But I haven't finished my diatribe on this. Okay. Because I want to impress upon people that we really need to make sure we're looking out for every small business, not just the ones that applied or a few of the favorites. Okay. So go ahead, Ms. Willoughby.
Terry Willoughby for the record. 2 things I wanted to clarify: that the Moss Adams, that's the maximum amount. We are responsible for any money that we award to any of these businesses or to like East Fork Fire. We are sub-recipients of our federal money, and so we get audited on that. So they're helping me make sure we have everything in compliance with the federal regulations. And I just want to let you know, I do meet with all the small businesses that are awarded the grants. We have a Zoom meeting with each one of them as soon as I get the checks, so that they understand all the requirements and the receipts that they have to submit. But that's it.
Okay. But I'm talking about before they ever get to you. They got to know to get to you. Larry?
Yeah, Barry, one of the issues that we have is we don't have a census of all the businesses in Douglas County. We don't have a business license tax. This was brought up years and years ago when they tried to impose a business license tax, or even just a registration. We might want to have some kind of a registration, and I know businesses hate to do that, but we have no direct way to contact every business in this county.
Well, you know, Larry, I would take exception with that, because that's what they made shoes for. You know, people need to go back the old-fashioned way, and that's go out and knock on doors and say, Denise, did you get contacted about a small business loan or grant? Did Denise get contacted?
I have no idea, but I can tell you that pushing a button to contact 3,000 businesses in Douglas County is a lot easier than hire somebody to go out with shoe leather and wear it out.
Well, I agree. I agree with that. But since we have some funding, we could hire some part-time folks to go out and do that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. I don't disagree with that.
You know, let's be more aggressive about it instead of, you know, Lisa can't do it all by herself. Or am I wrong, Patrick?
I think it's a question of time. I mean, we're running out of time. It's probably going to take us several weeks to process the applications that we already have, and we have to spend this by the end of December.
So let's get on it.
That's why none of the counties want to go have another round of these.
I don't care about the other counties. I care about our county, and I care about. I keep bringing up Iggy and Squiggy. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, do you?
Great hamburgers.
Yeah. They advertise that they got the best hamburger in the world. We all get Costco meat. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that they're a little operation down in TRE. Two guys who've been doing this for a long time. And I would bet, and I'd probably lose this money. That's why I don't bet. But I would bet that they haven't been contacted. And it just merely is going off the road a little bit and talking to them. I do it wherever I go, but I don't go out that much. Well, I think we need to have some people that are going out and soliciting. How are you doing? That'd be great information just to have, you know? So anyway, I can't make you spend the money.
But help them fill out the forms and the paperwork.
Yeah.
How do you do
that? Yeah. This is a real golden opportunity that we should be really thinking about the people that are here and doing something for them. How many businesses have you contacted that are at-home businesses, or, you know, where that's their only office? And how many of those need money? Has anybody contacted, for instance, what was that guy's name? That he ran for commissioner, and he has a small business that he operates, and his wife has one, and they do it from their house. He drafts plans for houses. You know,
Nathan Tolbert.
Yeah, Tolbert. I bet he hasn't been contacted. You know, and I just think that we need to be more aggressive about it. So thank you. End of story. Do we want to go on CARES funding anymore? We've said everything? Okay. Thank you much. We'll consider that issue closed. We'll move on next for presentation only. This will be a short conversation, I'm sure. Presentation on vacation home rentals VHR program. Discussion to include an update on current VHR program activities, including an update from HDL, the program's existing budget, and proposed budget as recommended by VHR Task Force, and the potential fees to cover program costs. Mr. Cates, and I understand Mr. George is not available, and that probably Jennifer is going to do this. Is that correct?
Correct. So as you explained in the title, there's kind of three things that we're trying to accomplish today. This is information only, so we're not asking for any decisions of the board today. Just trying to go through some of the pieces of detail from the VHR report and the program. The first piece is to kind of give you an update on what HDL has been doing. Mr. George sent his apologies. He was called to jury duty, notified us last night that we would not be able to attend. And the other piece that I want to talk about is the proposed budget that the task force report had proposals for positions. And I put together kind of a preliminary budget of what that could look like. And of course, part of the goal is to have a fee schedule that will fund that budget. So I've also put together a fee schedule for discussion purposes. I don't want anybody to think that I'm actually proposing that at this time. Just want to give you a sense of what it could look like, a fee schedule to fund a reasonable budget for the program. But before I get into that, I would like to turn it over to Jennifer Davidson to give you a little update of what's been going on with the program in HDL.
Okay, Ms. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Jennifer Davidson, Assistant County Manager for the record. As Patrick mentioned, unfortunately, HDL was not able to join us today, but I did take down some notes about what they were planning on sharing with the Commission, and I'm happy to give you this update. So just as a reminder, we currently contract with HDL for a number of purposes. They do TOT, Transit Occupancy Tax Administration, for us. In order to do that, we have a contract with them for $135,000 for that purpose. And then also they do TOT administration related to VHRs. And then they do permitting and other administrative work related to VHRs that we recently contracted with them in a second amendment to their original contract. For the VHR work that they are completing, they charge us $15 a permit. Which frankly, I would tell you that's a bit of a bargain. Not even a bit. It definitely is a bargain for the amount of work. The contract that they have for that purpose is about $22,000. And for the work that they are doing now, Host was charging us close to $90,000 for the same work. HDL services to us related to VHR, as I mentioned, involve processing TOT payments, and also auditing those TOT payments to make sure that they reflect documented stays on vacation rentals. HDL has a contract with Host Compliance so that we do still receive the benefits of Host, in the sense that we are still able to monitor whether or not people are renting their properties, the frequency that they're renting those properties, the anticipated income from those properties, and then also whether or not they're renting without a permit. So that we can go after them for compliance if we need to. HDL has taken on that function and still coordinates with Host for that purpose. They have contracted separately with Host to do that. And it's a very nice arrangement for us. We get to have our cake and eat it too for less money. They do process our permits. We did have a paper process before. And we were processing those in-house, and then we transferred to electronic permit processing when we moved to Host Compliance back in 2018. HDL has assumed that responsibility, and I am going to attempt to share my screen because I wanted to show you the portal that the public sees when they are doing this. Give me just one moment. All right, I hope you can see what I am seeing. The public should, when they are interested in applying for a vacation home rental permit, they can go onto the county's website. They can normally, when there are not elections and other important matters going on, it will be a button on our homepage that they can get to VHRs in order to make a complaint or to get to the webpage to start a permit application process. From that page, they can click to this page, and here they have a variety of options where they can apply for a new VHR permit. They can renew an existing permit. They can pay their TOT electronically. This is a new feature, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. Or if they complain, a member of the public is complaining, they can report a problem here. Members of the public, HDL is processing complaints. Members of the public can submit their complaints in a variety of ways. They can do so electronically, as I mentioned here, through this portal. They can submit an email. They can call. And if it's after hours, those calls, they can leave a message. Or if it's parking or noise enforcement complaints, the sheriff's office has assumed those responsibilities. The majority of complaints that we do receive related to VHR are noise and parking related. and do need to be dealt with right away. And we are pleased that the Sheriff's Office is working with us to respond to those complaints in a more timely fashion. And I believe that neighborhoods are appreciate a rapid response as well. Typically, the Sheriff's Office can get those party issues resolved and get people to quiet down right away. All right. Also, they can request an update on an existing application that they have with us. This new feature, property search, is a response to the complaints that we have received from citizens regarding VHRs wanting to know if a property is permitted or not. So now we have set up a database on our website where someone can search by a property address to see whether or not a property is permitted. There's a drop-down menu here where they can search by the business name. By the way, the business name and the property name are the same. The property address are the same. Really, this isn't relevant so much. We are planning on expanding this database, but let me give you a preview of what you're looking at. And I am just going to pull up the address of a known permitted property because I recently saw that a permit was approved for them. I'm pulling them up for no other reason than an example. So what a member of the public would do is they type in an address here. I'm going to type in 469. You can type in the whole address or part, hit search, and a property address pops up. In this instance, this is a permitted VHR. This is the information that a member of the public can view. It states when the property became a permitted VHR, the expiration date of the permit. This one's currently under review. It's not expired. That's why I pulled it up as an example. It was just on my radar. But then also, this is a new added feature to try to get some of the complaints resolved when there's an issue in neighborhoods. We have included the emergency contact information that's included on a VHR application so that if a resident wants to contact the property owner to complain about a specific issue related to the property, they can contact them directly. They don't have to go through us. This is something that we just added to the website within the last couple of weeks, and we are looking at modifying this as we go. We can potentially add some additional information regarding the number of the occupancy level for the permit, and then also parking spaces. We're going to play this by ear and see what makes the most sense from a user standpoint and a customer service standpoint. All right. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I can pull that back up if anyone has any questions on that. I'm just going through my notes. I mentioned that HDL is handling those complaints during business hours, those that they receive. On our website, excuse me, we have indicated to the public and also HDL indicates to the public that if they have a complaint related to noise or parking, they should refer those matters to the Sheriff's Office so that they can be handled immediately. Other matters are being handled administratively with follow-up letters by HDL to property managers and property owners. If it's a potential violation of county code, we do refer the matter to code enforcement for follow-up, and we are looking at issuing violations where appropriate or notices of violations and requiring corrective action in those matters. But for the most part, the role of HDL in this in those issues is to advise the manager of the problem, the complaint that was made against them, to educate them on our requirements in county code and the requirements of the permit, and to try to get them into compliance and to advise code enforcement if a violation is warranted. We make those determinations concurrently with HDL. They don't have that sole authority. They're keeping us in the loop the whole time so that we can make sure that the appropriate level of action is being taken in the appropriate time frame. Let me just see my notes, see if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. Feedback from the team is that this has been a bit of a learning process with our team and HDL as we get up to speed, and we still are modifying as we go. I can tell you our turnaround time on processing complaints and violations has increased, and we have increased efficiency as a result of HDL's work, but we still do have kinks to work out in this process. And a number of the recommendations contained in the VHR report submitted to you by the county manager There will be some additional steps that need to be taken in coordination with each HDL to implement those if the board agrees those are appropriate. We look forward to continuing to work with HDL on this. We think they're a good partner, and we have a lot of good options with them. Oh, I did want to make one other mention, which is one of the things that HDL has done to allow us to streamline our process with violations. Not only do they process complaints when they receive them, but we have established templates for the standard types of complaints, those that we can substantiate very quickly. They pre-fill in that form, that violation letter to us with the address and all the information that we need and submit it over to us so that we can issue it via certified mail right away. So the turnaround time is expedited as a result of HCL's work in coordination with county staff. And I'm really excited that we have created those efficiencies, and we're trying to put more and more in place as we go. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions or defer my remaining time to Mr. Cates.
All right, thank you. Questions from folks? Commissioner Ingalls. John, you're muted.
Jennifer, I've got a couple of questions in regard to the structure of this department now for code enforcement. How do you have it structured so the code enforcement operatives, and Sam, if I get into anything that's NATO top secret, you just cut it off, okay? How do you have your org chart structured within your organization?
Thank you, Mr. Ingalls, for that question. Currently, code enforcement reports to the Director of Community Development. We have discussed the possibility of looking at rearranging that org structure. Ultimately, I think it's the recommendation that it stay within community development, reporting to either the community development director or a manager within that department. But that we continue to increase coordination and communication with the sheriff's office so we can maximize the effectiveness of both our code enforcement team and the deputies that are responding to issues related to VHRs. We think leaving them separate makes a lot of sense because there's things that the sheriff's office can and should do that are appropriate for them to handle, and there are matters that are more appropriately handled by code enforcement. We think working together, we can wrap our arms around this.
You know, I'm of the persuasion that the code enforcement officers report to you directly, and then you work with them and you get the answers that they need from the other departments. But that's just something we can work on. Another question. This is sort of a P&L center. Are we tracking it so that we can see the revenue coming in and the expenses going out, so that we know it's not costing us any money?
I'm going to address that in the next segment.
Oh, okay. And how are we doing on code enforcement officers?
So we have submitted the recruitment. We currently have 2 code enforcement officers, and due to the prior action of this board, we have submitted the recruitment to initiate hiring the 3rd. We do anticipate that recruitment will be completed by the end of December. There is some time. Government is painfully slow, but we have background checks and things that we need to complete for this important position.
You're still working on a 3rd code enforcement officer?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Cates, I see Wes, but Mr. Cates, did you want to continue to make a presentation now, or are we doing what you expect?
You're doing what I expected. I'm going to talk about the revenues and proposed budget and proposed fee schedule. So if you have general questions on the program and HDL, I think now's the time to ask.
Okay. Then we'll get back with you. Commissioner Rice, thank you for being patient.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson, I have several meetings with different groups in our community up here scheduled for the next couple of weeks. one of the questions that I'm being asked, when can we expect an ordinance that can be published so that everybody up here at the lake will understand the rules and the processes?
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. I think that is dependent on this board's action. We do have some additional steps to take regarding what you would like to see included in the ordinance, which recommendations we are going to be putting in place. I am in the process of redlining the existing ordinance and am going to be coordinating with Mr. Taylor on bringing forward that information. But I think ultimately Patrick has some thoughts, Mr. Cates has some thoughts regarding the potential role of the advisory board, the appeals board in that process. And I think timing wise, it really just depends on how quickly we move on the recommendations. I don't know, Patrick, if you want to weigh in on that question.
Yeah, I think that was well said. My goal was to bring back an ordinance to establish the advisory and appeals board, and then use them to review the regulations before they came to the board. And then we'd work through that process and bring the whole set of regulations forward and work through them to bring to the board a vetted product.
Part of my problem is I have some groups that want no cap and other groups that want it capped at 1. And there's not a lot of in between.
Yeah.
One of the things I plan on doing is making copies of this presentation that's already on our website, and so that they can see where we are in the planning stages and get their input and their concerns regarding how many VHRs we're going to have here at the lake, how many are we going to cap it? Are we going to cap it where it is now? Are we going to cap it as the recommendations of your board, which I believe was something around 13%?
Yeah, 725 in the Tahoe Township was the recommendation.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Are you done, Mr. Rice?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Walsh.
Patrick, I'm concerned about this appeals board. What would an appeals board accomplish or recommend that the task force, who's worked for months and months and months, has not already done?
Well, it would become a permanent body. One of the things they would do would be to hear appeals from VHR operators for any fines or penalties or any of those issues. And it's just a way of making the task force kind of permanent, smaller, but it would serve a similar function.
Well, I don't.
Part of what they wanted reason that for this, just as an example, is the issue of caps. So the initial report is suggesting 725 is the correct cap for the Tahoe Township, based on about 600 or so that were licensed at the time. Well, is that really the right number or not? So I think there was a strong sense among the task force members that is something that should be revisited every year, and that the task force could make recommendations to the board for adjustments to that or any other adjustments to the regulations.
Well, my concern is that Jennifer said that, I think Jennifer, maybe it was you, but somebody said that, we're going to hire or form the appeals board, and then we're going to come back with an ordinance. I mean, that could drag out for months and months and months. We've got a lot of information. Why don't we, as the governing board, as the legislative board, why don't we make the decision and then move forward and let the appeals board handle the decision that we make?
I think that's a reasonable approach if that's the will of the board, for sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, Sam, I don't know if you got a copy of this letter from Natalie Yanish or not. It was the board recently. Wonder if you have any comments on that letter.
It was also included in the supplemental material.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did read her letter, Sam Taylor for the record, from the Douglas County DAs. I did read her public comments. Is there something specific you would like to inquire about relative to that?
Well, as to whether or not this is a commercial venture when you get to be in a motel or not in a residential area.
Well, I can say, again, Sam Taylor for the record, that I did a bunch of research on VHRs, and throughout the U.S., they're generally treated in two different ways, either as a commercial venture or as a residential venture. And so you run into zoning issues and commercial licensure issues depending on how the courts decide to rule. I don't believe there is a case in Nevada dealing with the subject. I couldn't find one. So there really isn't precedent set here, and it's just up to the board to determine how they want them to be treated.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I have several points, actually 7, that I would like to make. And I would tell you that I was happy to hear that you're in the process of hiring the code enforcement officer, because I think at least 2 of us, Commissioner Ingalls and myself, were pretty vocal about we need to have an additional code enforcement officer. And I was even also pushing for a deputy. I have since talked with Mr. Sheriff Coverly, and I will talk about that in a moment. And in fact, that moment has arrived. I think before we go much further with this and talk about a cap, I hear all kinds of numbers. I heard HDL came back and said that there are actually 500 permit holders and VHRs. And I was wondering, is that true? Is that have they come back and said that?
So, Patrick Cates for the record. The last count that I received from them was 501 licensed VHRs. We have lost some. We did have 608 several months ago, and we did lose some during the COVID period that have not renewed. I would also point out that HDL is in the process of conversion and renewing permits, so it's possible, I think likely, that number will increase.
But point of fact, we have about 500. We don't have the 608 that we were talking about, or the 1,600 that we were talking about. And so we're dividing this whole program for 500 people out of the total of 39,000 people in the county. This seems like a lot of effort for a very small percentage of the community. And that goes, in my mind, to the cap. Why have a cap? If you want to talk about capitalistic entrepreneurship, that would be directly opposed to it. Caps in the past have not proven to be real effective. I mean, we got a cap on growth and we've never come close to it. But they had a cap in the gas crisis of 55 miles an hour, and everybody was going faster than 55 miles an hour. So the cap became meaningless. And I think that, and the cap on growth of 382 or whatever, 282, and we have never come close to it. And yet we have development authorities for up to 8,000. Well, we're never going to reach the 8,000, and we have never reached the cap to even worry about the growth thing. So I think the cap in this case is
and I think in all cases, is counterposed to good economics and good economic thought. And I don't see how that helps in the first place. But that's just my opinion. And I've also heard that we ought to have a moratorium on any more VHRs. Well, it seems like what we've done is we've gone down in the VHRs. They ought to let us keep counting. Pretty soon we'll be down to 100 VHRs if we keep counting them like this. So I don't think that it's the number so much as the people that are causing problems. And those people ought to be ferreted out, and they ought to be made to conform to the law. And I think both Mr. Engels and myself made that point very clear in the last meeting. So, I think furthermore that this should be countywide. This should not be just at the lake, because my experience with these things is the people are much smarter than us. And when they see they can't go to the lake, then they'll come here. Then they can't do it here, then they'll go to TRE. And it's just an ever moving target for us. So we ought to have a countywide policy. And the cap, if you want to have a cap, I don't think it should have one, but if you do, it should include down here in the valley too. And I think the other part of this was that we had 133, 135 proposed probable VHRs, but we weren't sure about that number. So I talked with Sheriff Coverly about this, and I talked to the county manager. And our problem is we can't ever get onto something real quick and resolve it. We have to drag it out. So I was suggesting that in the community policing activity that the patrols do up there, basically they have 3 patrols a night of 2 people per shift. And so I didn't mean at night, in a day. So if you gave each patrol 5 addresses to check out during the course of their 8-hour shift, one that conforms to community policing, they could check to see, just drive by and check and see if somebody is conducting a VHR there and there is no license there. But we've heard they're doing it. And they don't even have to get out of the car. They can just see if there are people there, if there's a lot of cars, if there's noise. And that would help as an input about whether or not they've got a VHR. If they had a VHR, then it can be turned over to code enforcement. And I think eventually we would want, and the sheriff is not opposed to this, but we could put code enforcement under the sheriff, but he would have to have the whole program. You can't do it piecemeal. We can't hire a deputy for code enforcement. What we've got to do is hire a deputy that he can use, a position that the sheriff can do what he wants to do and needs to do with his particular section that does code enforcement. But this ought to be a gradual program. This could be a goal of our program is to put it in the sheriff's department and put all the code enforcement officers under the sheriff. And maybe you evaluate that before or during the next budget cycle. So the sheriff would know what he has for a budget if you want to do that. If you start community policing, the sheriff is not against doing something like that, but he'd like to know that it's going to be part of an overall program and what we're trying to obtain out of it. As far as accepting the task force, I really appreciate the hard work that these folks put in. And I think it's good that they put in time on a program and a problem that they really see and bring up solutions that we can adopt. One of those solutions was the cap. And I spoke pretty fervently about it last time, and I'm doing it again. But people get upset because you don't adopt their particular solution to the problem. And so then they feel, why did you even have a advisory board or an advisory council, task force. And well, that's to solicit what things people are looking at, but that doesn't mean that every one of them is going to be adopted. And that should be made clear to people when we say you're on an advisory board. And that goes to this appeals and advisory board. I said last time, and I believe this time is no different. If you're going to make it an appeals board, make it an appeals board. Don't make it an advisory board, because they'll expect what they advise is going to become the law of the land. The appeals board could evaluate whether or not this person should have a permit or not. If you want to do that right now, I don't see any problem with creating it right now. I'm not sure that's going to help, but nonetheless, that's what they recommend. I go along with it, but not at an advisory board. And advisory board, what's the number? I talked about the total numbers already. So those are my points. I think this is, the longer we procrastinate in getting these things adopted, the more it becomes less important. And so I personally, I wouldn't wait around to put everything in the code. I would put out the administrative decisions now and help people like Commissioner Rice, who can hand them out right away. Some of these things are going to take a little longer. If it's the decision to move forward with moving code enforcement to the sheriff's department, which I really support, if you move the whole program and all the people and the funding to it, and not as a trial, but as you go along now, you're trying it out, seeing how it's working, and then in 6 months you plan in your budget to do that. I think those things can be down the road a little bit. I think if you're looking for us to adopt or not adopt each point of what you made as a suggestion, which I'm sure you got from the advisory board, Mr. Gates, then maybe we should address each one point by point. I thought we gave some pretty clear definition in our last action meeting on this. And you are acting on that by hiring a code enforcement person. But that doesn't end with that code enforcement person, in my opinion. So, did I generate more conversation, Mr. Walsh?
Well, you did. I think you'll be happy to know that I had a long meeting with myself about some of the things you just talked about. I was initially in favor of some type of cap, and I think now that perhaps we shouldn't have a cap. I think a cap just invites problems, especially with private property rights. So I mean, I would be in favor of no cap, and I'm also in agreement with you about the valley. Let's have one ordinance. We're one county. Let's have one ordinance. Get it done now, and be done with it. I did have a question though about the application. I did ask Jennifer yesterday for a copy of the application for a VHR permit or renewal. I went online and I couldn't find the permit per se or the application per se, and it frustrates me just like it frustrates me when I go online to fill out other things that you can't see the whole application. You can't sit down and look at the application before you start filling it out. But anyhow, in that application, and I would suggest, Jennifer, by the way, that we post a PDF form of the application so they can look at it before they start filling it out. But on question number 6 on the application, ask if there is a homeowners association for the where the property is located, and if the answer is yes, they ask for the name of the homeowners association. I think we ought to go one step further. If the answer is yes, I think we ought to ask the applicant before we decide to move forward with the application. I think we should decide, or we should ask for a letter from the homeowners association saying that they agree that it's okay to have this property within their association. It's okay to have them as a VHR. And I think this way in the future, we would avoid a lot of complications dealing with homeowners associations. Anyhow, those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Ingles, did you want to make a comment? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Nelson, raise your hand. I'll get back to you, Mr. Ingles.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I want to, we have a form for the multiple listing system service in Douglas County for right to farm. I think that if you go ahead and approve VHRs for the county, you should come up with a form for the MLS so everybody knows that VHRs are allowed anywhere in the county. It's just another thing that would have to be done. Otherwise, you're going to have people selling that come in here from Reno, have a client, they sell something here, they don't know what the rules are, and we're just going to end up with trouble. So I think we have to look at that also at this point.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Mr. Ingles?
Chairman, I disagree with you on commingling code enforcement with law enforcement. Every municipality I've experienced worked with, the two entities are separate because everything with code enforcement is highly specific. Everything with law enforcement is highly specific. And that jurisdiction should have a direct accountability to the county and the county manager's office or assistant county manager. Hence, I'm of the persuasion that the organizational structure should be assistant county manager, code enforcement, right there. Doesn't go down deep into some other department and everything else, because then stuff can't get done. These people have to have authority to get stuff done. As far as the number of entities up there that are working as VHRs, we don't really know yet. The database will help compile that, and we'll have some kind of a number to work with. And we have to think about the Tahoe Beach Club. That's almost 170 units. And a lot of those, it was my understanding from the people that were selling those, that if they couldn't rent them out as VHRs, they wouldn't be able to sell them. Now, it's probably not in all cases, but there's some number that is going to be VHRs that'll have to be included with the beach club. And if you're somebody who's living up there and you've got a VHR next to you and they aren't playing by the rules and they get crowds and all that other stuff, they don't care. They don't want them there. Or they want them to play by the rules. And the whole thing comes up, and the problems come up is when guests come up there and start getting out of control. That's when the problems arise. So I'm of the persuasion to keep it separate from the sheriff's department. They'll work together, but law enforcement, code enforcement, two different things. And the total, we've got to include the beach club, and the org structure should be not planning, but straight to the assistant county manager. Because I'm going to be calling Jennifer when I've got questions. I'm not going to be calling Delaire. They got enough stuff going on down there. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Obviously, before this is decided, I'll be gone and you'll be there. So good luck.
We're all working in the same direction. It's just, all these little nuances and how we're going to get there and structure this, so it can work for all parties concerned, because it is a complicated issue. And the Pandora's box was opened years ago. We didn't do it, and so we're trying to put that thing back in the box and get it under control. And you've got all these factions that there's so much money involved. People don't want to necessarily play by the rules. It's like the city of Santa Monica. The city of Santa Monica, VHRs are verboten throughout the city, but yet people still try to operate them. And I told you before, they have 3 code enforcement officers that work undercover to try to smoke them out. So this is what goes on. And we're going to have people doing that here. They aren't going to want to play by the rules, and we're going to have to smoke them out. Just that simple.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Rice? You're muted, Wes. There you go.
Happens. I concur with Commissioner Engels that the Sheriff Department and the code enforcement should be separate. One of the problems that we're having up here at the lake and why people are requesting that we have a cap is because of Proposition T over in South Lake Tahoe, where they have outlawed VHRs, period. And that's going through the courts as we speak. But one of the concerns is that the people that had VHRs over there are now coming over to Douglas County and buying homes in residential communities and then turning them into the motels. And we have a faction up here that would just soon outlaw VHRs altogether, which is not going to happen. I'm certain of that. But then we also have those that fear that with this surge of people coming over from California, that it's going to destroy the neighborhood. So I'm hoping that we can get a balance between the number of 725 seems reasonable to me. But I really think that we do need to have some sort of a cap over here or up here so that we don't get overrun with the VHRs.
Well, if you get overrun, people aren't going to buy. But I guess Mr. Nelson's suggestion comes into play here.
I agree.
The entry tax. All right. Any other comments? Mr. Taylor, you wanted to make a comment, I think.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It was earlier in response to Commissioner Nelson's point about the right to farm notification. I think that's a really, really, really good idea. We had a case recently where an individual basically was trying to sell a VHR, and the person was trying to buy the property as a VHR, and there were outstanding TOTs to be paid. And I think the notification that Commissioner Nelson was talking about would solve that problem, or at least go a long ways to solving that problem for a subsequent purchaser.
Well, we can't make any decisions in this, but if you were to bring something like that forward for the next discussion and action, I think we could at least deal with it. And so I would suggest that our next meeting have something like that so we can get this program going. Mr. Cates, did you want to do something or say something about budget?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Before I move on to that, I just want to thank everybody for the comments. That was really good. That was helpful to me. I know there's a lot of pieces to this, but that gives me some sense of where to move forward. So let me go ahead and move on to money. First of all, before I put this on the screen, I think the fundamental issue that we have with VHRs in the county, notwithstanding all these recommendations that I think are very good recommendations, is a lack of resources for enforcement, period. I mean, we have VHR rules now, and we don't have enough resources on it. So that's kind of why I'm leading with this discussion about fees and budget. I know there's a lot of other pieces to this, but if we don't find a revenue stream and dedicate some real resources to it, I don't care what kind of regulations we put in place, we're not going to get on top of it. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I just have a few pages here to walk you through. This first page shows room tax revenue from VHRs. Last fiscal year 1920, that would have been the fiscal year that ended in June of this year, 2020. We collected over $2 million in room tax from VHRs. This is the first fiscal year that we actually broke VHRs out of our room tax collection figures, so that was a kind of a standalone figure. There are other fees that are collected related to room tax, the $5 per night surcharge that goes to the Tahoe Douglas Visitors Authority. They pay that as well, but this is just straight room tax. And of course, the room tax does get distributed to the Visitors Authority as well as the county. So this doesn't all come directly to the county, but that is how much we collected last fiscal year. The current fiscal year, which started July 1, we have collected $785,000 to date. That is better than expected. There's a few months lag on collections based on the timing of that. So, we're not even halfway through the fiscal year, and not a bad figure. We'll see how the year ends up. We had the adopted budget was $1.1 million for the year, and it looks like we're likely to exceed that. Although the only caveat I would have there is, there are increases in COVID cases across the country, including in Nevada, and I think there's still some risk and possibility of further shutdowns, which could impact the revenue. But so far, we're looking pretty good, and I'm expecting that we're going to exceed the budgeted number. I don't know if we'll hit the actuals that we hit last year or not, but so far so good. And then I just wanted to point out that associated with those collections, we do have a contract with HDL. The maximum amount of their contract is $135,000 per year. That's based on how many returns they process. I would also point out this $2 million figure. I had a meeting with the consultant with the Visitors Authority that was doing some analysis. And if you look at the combination of VHRs that are likely operating without a license, as well as whether or not current licensed VHRs are accurately reporting revenue, they're speculating that we could double this number just based on more enforcement. And I know HDL has a piece of that as well to audit going forward, but there's certainly potential to grow this number as a revenue stream. And this is not what we're looking at to fund the program. As we talked about, we wanted the administrative fees to cover the administration of the program, but this is the revenue benefit to the county as well as the Visitors Authority. Okay, so this slide gives you an overview of the proposed budget for the VHR program. 4.8 full-time equivalent positions, $377,000. Professional service contracts of $75,000. This would include the $22,000 that we're currently contracted to pay HDL. I think that there is a need to have more contract assistance with this program, whether it's with HDL or other contractors. So we put a little extra money in there. Other services and supplies, that's where we pay for badges. I would point out that I've gotten the contact information from the sheriff's office and where they buy badges from, and we're exploring that for code enforcement officers to have civilian badges for them. So I know that was a topic at the last meeting. We also have some indirect costs. This is kind of a standard thing to build into a cost center. So that gives you a total budget of over $550,000 a year. And now the way that the personnel costs are broken down, some of these are existing costs, existing personnel. So we're talking about partial allocation of existing staff towards this program. You may recall that we were talking about a figure of 1.5 FTEs currently dedicated to this effort. The hope is that some of the administrative oversight could decrease if we had more people working down below. So that's why we've come up with this 0.8 FTE as an allocation. These are existing budgeted positions. This isn't new money. It's just we would be looking to cover it with this new revenue source. So the 4 positions that were in the report included the code enforcement officer that the board approved at the last meeting, a counter technician, an administrative assistant, and a deputy sheriff position for a total of 4 new FTEs. That is $302,000. Now, I believe we talked about this at the last meeting, but if we put a new fee schedule in place, it's going to take a while to collect that money in order to pay for these expenses. And so what I want to do, if the board is amenable to adding these positions, would be to fund them with an augment for the first half of this year out of the general fund. There's multiple sources that we can look at besides the fees that we haven't put in place yet. If we did that and created all these positions and funded them for the second half of the current fiscal year, this is the amount of money, $151,000, that we would need to augment community development's budget for the current fiscal year until we've got those collections in for the fees. Now, if we move to...
Well, before we move off of that, let's...
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions from anybody? Well, I'll tell you, it's so small when you present it. Is there a way you can present that, you know, at 200% so that like an old guy like me can read it? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's helpful. I know that my views on this are a little bit different than a couple of the other law enforcement folks, but in talking with Sheriff Coverly, I said that having us fund a deputy who is in charge of or responsible for some kind of code enforcement is not a good idea, because that deputy should be run and owned and working for the sheriff with an agreement that he would do something for code enforcement. And if we fund this, then theoretically, we're funding a sheriff's deputy that's going to be primarily working for community development. That's not the way it should be done. If the sheriff determines he needs another person, then I think we say, okay, if we're inclined to say, okay, we'll do that. But the sheriff is an independently elected person, and he's not, the way I read what he said is he's not really in favor of us controlling one of his deputies. And I agree with that. I don't think we should, you know? So that's the reason that we're moving, that he and I thought about moving code enforcement under him. Then he controls it. He tells them what to do and when to do it and how to do it, with advice and consent from you. But
can I clarify that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the deputy sheriff that's shown here, there's not an intention that this deputy sheriff would be under code enforcement. It would be under the sheriff. What this does is give the sheriff office the additional resources up at the lake, so that they could do things like respond to noise complaints and parking complaints and that sort of thing. This position would be fully under the control of the sheriff. And what we expect is there wouldn't be one sheriff dedicated to VHRs. The sheriff would use his resources in this additional FTE to allocate whenever they respond to things related to VHRs, and much like they allocate to grants for traffic enforcement or something like that. So just to clarify, that is a position fully under control of the sheriff.
Well, then maybe what it ought to say is deputy sheriff or monies to the sheriff for those kinds of actions, as opposed to a deputy.
Well,
I think the sense was, and the sheriff's office did work with us on these recommendations, and I think the sense was that they have two officers dedicated at the lake, and having a third would help, because they get spread really thin. And between all of them, whenever they responded to VHR related stuff, they would charge costs for the VHR program.
Yeah, we understand that this is a pro forma budget, and that has to be included because it is a cost that will be incurred. But overall, it's to give us an idea of what it's going to cost to do what's being proposed. So, yeah, I think that we can just work with this.
Okay, fine.
We understand what it is. And
Okay, continue, Mr. Cates. Thank you, Mr. Engels. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let me move on to fee schedule scenario. And again, discussion only. I don't want the public thinking that, this is it and we're putting this in place. It's just for discussion. This is how we get to revenue figures in order to fund the budget we just went over. And hopefully that's big enough. So first of all, let me just cover some of these numbers down at the bottom because we had some discussion about that before. From the VHR report, at the time that information was put together, we had a total of 608 VHRs permitted, and the estimate for unpermitted VHRs in the Tahoe Township was 135. This is just dealing with the Tahoe Township. So the total estimated VHRs in the township, both permitted and unpermitted, was 743. So the proposed cap on VHR is 725. I'm sure Jennifer could probably go into more detail about how they developed that, but it's based on the percentage in neighborhoods that's talked about in the report that are VHRs. And you can see it kind of captures what was then the existing number of VHRs as well as the ones that were unpermitted. That gets you pretty close to bringing everybody in the fold. Again, the most recent report we had from HDL, we only had 501. I would be a little cautious about that. I mean, the fact of the matter is the number changes over time anyway. Some people only do it seasonally, homes get sold. There's definitely fluctuation there. But no doubt there's been some impact from COVID on the VHR activity. And I know we've seen an increase in complaints, but it's not always clear that this is VHR activity. In some circumstances, what it is people that own these homes as second homes who may have been renting them periodically as VHRs, actually coming to Tahoe during the lockdowns to stay in their own homes. I can't tell you how much of that is going on, but it definitely is going on. And in talking to the people at the lake, there seems to be a trend of people moving up there permanently to remote work. So how many VHRs we will end up with in the future, I think is speculative. We don't really know. I think this 501 number will increase over time. But we just don't know. It's always going to fluctuate. Just keep that in mind. But for purposes of this analysis, I used the figure of 600 VHRs. I was concerned about picking too high a target, especially when we only have 501 registered right now, and being able to generate enough money to fund the budget. So 600 VHRs is what I used in this analysis. Now, if we go back up to the fee schedule scenarios, first we have the existing fee schedule right here at the top. So for a new application for a VHR, it's $400. For renewal, it's $250. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how big a VHR it is. Everybody pays the same price. Now, there's some VHRs that are very small. They do very little activity, but there's some that they're doing a lot of business and they're making a lot of money, and good on them. But I don't know that the fees that we're charging here are any kind of, even the ones proposed here, are any kind of barrier to them conducting their business, given the scale of what's going on up there. So again, I'm sorry.
Too inexpensive. Should be more, but that's not the topic right now.
So the recommendations from the task force were to break the fee schedule into 3 tiers. The first tier is a true host. That's where the person that owns or manages the property is on premise during the visit, and they have no more than 2 visitors. Tier 2 would be basically a regular VHR. It's not necessarily somebody on premise for up to 10, for an occupancy up to 10. And then tier 3 is for occupancy over 10. So working with those, and you could slice and dice this any way you want. I got a spreadsheet if you want to play with numbers, but this is what I landed on. $350 for a new permit for tier 1, $1,000 for tier 2, and $1,600 for tier 3. And then again for renewals, $250 for tier 1, $800 for tier 2, $1,200 for tier 3. Now, here's another factor that fluctuates over time is the distribution of these VHRs. I looked at a couple of different data points several months apart, and this number does kind of fluctuate a little bit. I picked the number that had most of them in the tier 2 category because that's where most of them fall as well. And I didn't want to, where that was the bulk of them, I wanted to make sure the fees were in the right grouping. So we've got 3% of them as tier 1 true host. I will tell you, we don't have good data on what is a true host. So I'm just looking at VHRs that have an occupancy at 2. So it's doesn't perfectly align with the recommendations, but for analysis, it seemed to be a pretty good proxy. So if we apply those percentages to the 600, that's your distribution across the tier types. And then if you apply, I also applied a 10% of all the annual applications being new applications, 90% being renewal. Again, that's subjective. That number probably changes quite a bit over time. But with that said, with all of that analysis, you crunch the numbers, you end up with $557,000 per year, which would cover the budget that was presented on the other page.
Patrick, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
In that 630 estimate, does that include the beach club?
I don't know. I didn't go through and check the addresses. I'm not sure if any of those. I don't know. Let me look.
Because those places are selling pretty good right now.
Yeah, I didn't see any addresses that would align with the beach club in the data set that I worked with.
Well, by next season, they're going to be renting them out as VHRs. Some will.
Yeah. So, any questions on that? Thoughts, concerns?
All right, no questions. Moving on.
Okay, well, that's all I have. I guess
we have a chart for fines. What, if they're operating a VHR and they haven't applied for a permit, or,
we were trying to pull some numbers on fines. It was a little fuzzy. I didn't include it here because I don't think we should be relying on fine revenue in order to fund the program. I mean, the idea is to get people compliant.
No, I understand. I understand that. It just to know what, because these things are making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so in order for them to comply with code, they've got to understand if they don't, they're going to get whacked pretty hard. I mean, Sam, what do you think?
Commissioner Engels, Sam Taylor for the record from Douglas County DAs. Currently, the fines and penalties for VHRs being in noncompliance, unpermitted, $5,000 is the fine. It's a one-time fine. In addition, for continued noncompliance with the permit program, it's up to $500 per day.
That's pretty stiff.
So what I'm hoping to get some sense from the board, I know this is just informational, but if this looks reasonable to you in terms of this fee schedule and the proposed budget, what I would do is come back to the board for an action item to implement this fee schedule and to create those positions and do the augment to get us through the first fiscal year, if you guys have an appetite for that. And I also heard a lot about, the other pieces you'd like to put in place as well. So we'll bring some things back on that. But I was hoping I might get some direction on whether or not you would like to move forward with the fee schedule and the proposed staffing.
Well, it looks okay, but I think you ought to throw a little bit in there for the beach club.
Patrick, if you're looking, this is for presentation only. If you're, so we can't give you direction apparently, but if I were to give you direction, I would say go ahead and incorporate a lot of those things we just talked about.
Okay.
It always strikes me that the one thing that we do is we plan for a lot of administration. And our object is to get code enforcement people that can get on the ground, identify these things, and collect the monies and make sure everybody's toting the line in terms of what the rules are. So we got an administrative assistant, we got a counter technician, we got all these administrative positions, and we're only talking about 2 people, a deputy and a code enforcement officer. It's highly weighted towards the administrative function, and in my view, it's not weighted enough on the actual get out there and do the job folks. Can you look at this and make sure that you have an appropriate number of people doing that get out there and show the county flag, and that the county's interested in making sure that people are toting the line on this, as opposed to somebody sitting at a desk back in the county? I don't get the feeling that we have a good program because we only hired 2 people, but we got a whole list of people that you showed us that are going to be involved in the program.
Good
So I'd like to see more operators, if you will, as opposed to admin folks. Can you take a look at this? And if you're going to bring this budget back to us quickly, which I don't have a problem with, I would like to see more emphasis on operational folks that are out there doing something. I don't know what the rest of you think about it, but that's just my opinion.
No, I agree 100%, because code enforcement should know what the fine is. I don't know what happens now when somebody's gets fined by code enforcement, but they come into an administrative office that we've already got there, and this is what it's going to cost. The code enforcement officer can hand it to the clerk and say, this is what it's going to cost. This guy has to pay it. Done.
I understand and appreciate that. Just a couple of comments. Part of why some of these administrative staff are in there, because we've been using temp services to try to manage the administrative functions of this program. And I think by having some of those administrative resources, it helps the code enforcement officers get out there instead of doing paperwork. The other thing that I would add is that the way I did this analysis and my thought process was, if we base this on 600 VHRs and we get more than that, then there's more regulation, there's more need to have code enforcement officers there. And if the revenue grows beyond that, then we have an opportunity to add more code enforcement officers. Jennifer, you put a lot of work into this. Do you have anything you want to add about these positions?
No, I would just say, although we have worked with this board to add the code enforcement position at your direction, we do currently have 3 code enforcement officers, and a portion of their time will be dedicated to the management of BHRs. A lot of the complaints that we receive are related to BHRs, so it's not just one body out in the field, it's multiples. That combined with the sheriff's office, we do think that we will have boots on the ground. A lot of this work, believe it or not, is administrative work. The issuing of the violations, the follow-up, the making sure you have all of the paperwork in place for due process and to get someone into compliance. A lot of it, unfortunately, is bureaucratic paper shuffling. I don't know if Mr. Taylor wants to add anything else. We do give, if there was one change to code that I would make, is that it takes an act of God, in my opinion, to actually find someone in violation. Our code is structured to get people into compliance. We have 30 days of work that goes into actually issuing a violation. More than 30 days of work, because potentially we had a whole month prior to that just trying to get evidence. and following up with them to try to see if they have gotten into compliance and allowing them the opportunity to correct their actions before we issue a violation does create quite a bit of paperwork. And I think if we were to change code in some ways, in some areas, so that a violation could be issued more quickly, I would like to see that happen if it were substantiated, instead of now it's targeted at getting individuals into compliance and giving them chances to come into compliance. Maybe, in my opinion, more chances than they should receive. Of course, this is all policy decisions for the board to make. Staff, that's my opinion. It may or may not matter. But right now, the way it is set up, there is quite a bit of administration so that code enforcement can be out in the field. So it's a balancing act. We hear you. Enforcement has to be the cornerstone of this program, or we're never going to be able to make it work.
Well, we talked about this before with Mr. Taylor about revamping the code pursuant to what you were talking about, Ms. Davison. So that ought to be part of what you bring back, so we can get it done and get on the program and cut down on the administrivia and increase the enforcement. So, you got several things when you bring the budget back. You got a change to the code. You got the manpower aspect to resolve and get rid of the administrivia. And then you got the actual budget that you want to bring back to us. And I'm available tomorrow. If you can get it all done tonight, great. Let's call a meeting. I
think we're being too kind. If they're in violation, we know what the violation is. Code enforcement writes it down. You're in violation. He gives it to Sam. Sam puts a lien on their place. I don't want any discussion. And you want to fight it, come on down.
I can support that.
No prisoners.
There you go. Anyway, I think the essence of what we're saying is the quicker the better.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion that you want to have on this?
Need to open Pandora's box again. Actually, I like the program that Patrick and Ms. Davidson has put together. I like what I saw, and I see it's defensible, and I see that it's affordable, and I think that that's the way we ought to go.
Yep.
Okay.
We're headed in the right direction. It's just, I agree with the chairman. The code enforcement officer is, that is just utterly basic. Nothing else matters unless you've got that.
Obviously, I agree. All right. So we've been able to get through that item, and we go on to the next. Let me get that agenda up. Okay. Lastly, Mr. Cates, was there any more discussion that you wanted to have on this?
Nope, that was it. I appreciate all the feedback. It's very helpful.
Okay. I not often they say that to us. Item 10, for presentation only, reports, updates from county commission members concerning the various boards and or commissions that they may be a member of or a liaison to, or meetings, functions they have attended. Before I go around the horn, I want to mention one thing is on my calendar is the meeting on the 15th, which is for the canvass of the vote, I believe. So we're all supposed to be available. Is there any understanding that the canvass of the vote will not occur on the 15th?
It's the 14th, I thought.
Okay, 15th, 14th, whatever the date.
For the record, we have that on the 16th. And Kathy Lewis is on track to do that. She will have, we just went over the timeline today, so she's on track for that to occur.
Oh,
okay. So it's the 16th. I just wanted everybody to be reminded that we have another meeting and it's for the canvass of the vote.
Yep.
All right. Going around the horn, Mr. Engels.
Nothing.
Mr. Nelson.
Nothing to report.
Have you submitted the income tax thing? The tax to come in?
Yeah.
Like
right.
it. Mr. Walsh.
Yes, sir. I just one thing. You know, I sit on the Carson Valley Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and at yesterday's meeting, just want to let you know it was the general consensus of the board that they were hopeful that the new commissioners that take their office in January will recognize the importance of the chamber to our community and work with the chamber to strengthen Douglas County's economic vitality as we emerge from this COVID pandemic. And I might further suggest that the new commissioners might make a point of attending, even before they take their seats, of attending a chamber board meeting so they can learn more about this real important organization. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Rice?
Just about the only thing I have to announce is that the bond sale for the event center is going to happen in 5 days. And that's all I have.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close the agenda and open closing public comment. At this time, public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Board of County Commissioners. Ms. Wood, do we have any closing comments?
Yes, sir. I have received one and I will start playing it.
We're starting closing comments at 4:46. How many do you have?
Just one.
Okay. Can you play it?
Yes, sir.
Jim Slade. In September, the county closed our public airport to allow a political event with approximately 30,000 participants with no social distancing, very few masks, contrary to the governor's mandate. You may think that event was a great idea, as all of you do. Others might see it as an unnecessary risk to the health and safety of our citizens. How you feel about that event is not the point, though. Not at all. My point is that the Board of County Commissioners still refuse to have in-person public meetings, even though the governor's mandate allows that, and reasonable precautions, including social distancing and wearing masks, could easily be accomplished. Why the hypocrisy? The town of Minden's been having in-person meetings for several months. The county's been advertising an in-person flood awareness event less than 2 weeks from now at the community center. So why no in-person county commissioner meetings? Is it just the chairman's desire to have as little public comment as possible? That's unacceptable, especially when the long-delayed master plan update is being considered. Both the county manager and the deputy DA have told me that the decision lies solely with the chairman. Mr. Penzel supported a gathering of 30,000 people with no social distancing, few masks, in violation of the governor's mandate. Yet he refuses to have in-person board meetings with social distancing and mask requirements that would be within the governor's mandate. The hypocrisy is palpable. The public expects more from you, Colonel Penzel. Do the right thing and open the meetings to the public and revert to the long-held procedure of allowing public comment on each agenda item that is for possible action when it is considered. You no longer have any excuse. If you feel that you need a larger venue, then move the meetings to the CBIC or community center. Your continued use of virtual meetings would only indicate to the public that you really don't want to hear what they have to say. That would certainly violate the intent of the open meeting law. The public deserves to be heard on all items and not so severely limited in time to address them. Chairman Penzel's earlier righteous indignation about the fines levied on the county regarding the September event is mirrored by the indignation of the public and not being allowed to have in-person meetings. The chairman's duplicity is overwhelming. End the hypocrisy. Open the meetings.
Any further public comment?
No, sir.
All right. Well, then I will.
Chair, I'd just like to make one quick public comment. I really want to thank the clerk's office for the great job they did on the elections this year down at the community center and throughout the county. Kathy and Dita did a great job along with their staff. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
All right. And I have a public comment about the partly of what Jim Slade's accusing me of, but because we have had an increase in our responses, COVID positives, and we lost, unfortunately, and my heart goes out to those that lost a person to it, that governor is considering moving us back to 50 people total as opposed to the 500, which is going to make it even more difficult. I'm sure Mr. Ritchie is on top of this and will provide good guidance. And in this particular day and age now, with the COVID going back up, the COVID responses, and some 35% of our population is in the high risk category, it doesn't make sense to try and make as many people sick as possible. So through an abundance of caution, those things that we can control, I believe we should control, regardless of how many people don't like me. All right. Any other comments, public comments? All right. We'll still see. We started at 4:46. It's 4:51. It's waiting 5 minutes. And at that point, we have no further public comment. Is that correct?
I have a public comment.
Oh, go ahead.
It's almost happy hour and we're on time.
Yeah, and that'll make us happy. All right. It's nice to end this on a good note. Thank you, Mr. Engels. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance, and we'll declare the meeting adjourned.
Good day, all.
Good day.